see. Oh, let me kick it. Okay. Yes. So it's 10:05. We'll go ahead and get started as people come in. We'll join. I want to welcome everybody who to the virtual operator roundtable. It's been a combination of both the Wastewater Treatment Committee and the Biosolids Committee with AZ Water, who are combined together, put this together and put this virtual roundtable for the team together. Really quick, I want to just give a little bit of housekeeping. You should please mute your microphones or keep it off for non-presenters. Please turn off your cameras, so therefore we can kind of have the presenters and the panelists, their cameras at the forefront. If you could, just so we have a means of recording, although we will be recording this, but please go ahead and put your name and location in the chat. Therefore, we have a record of you, so that when Shayna also looks through that, so we can get your PDHs awarded to you correctly. So if you do have any questions, we advise please type it in, first type it in the chat, and then once you type in the chat, I will actually interact with you and get you to ask the question, or if not, I can ask the question for you on that. And then to interact with the panelists, please just raise your hand, and that's a way for you to actually talk directly with the panelists, even ask them a direct, and we'll call, actually the moderators will call on you as it goes, and we'll allow you to you should just unmute at that point and talk. So if you do get disconnected, please just try and log back in. We don't think we should have any issues unless I lose internet at my place, but I think it's all running through me. And just as an advisory to everybody, this will be recorded and used and be able to post again to be able to view later down the line. And really our last just big thing, we recognize everyone's sick and tired of virtual meetings, but we also wanted to at least give some training and give back to the operators and some useful information. So we do invite this as users an opportunity to interact. Please ask the panelists some questions. We have some time to fill here, so don't be afraid to ask some questions and move forward with that. So, in terms of our schedule here, so from 10 to 11 o'clock, we're going to have some panelists to talk about the infrastructure bill. We will be having breaks, about a 10-minute break after each session, except after the 12 o'clock session. That's where we will have a that's where we're going to have a 30-minute lunch break for you. And then once we come back from lunch, we'll actually be, our second session will be the Pfas, how it affects a plant. And then we'll have a 30-minute lunch break. And then from 12:30 to 1, we're actually been playing a game for prizes. So we do invite everybody to join in on that. It'll be a Jeopardy. And then lastly, we have, which was some of these questions were generated when you registered, was operator retention and what current municipalities and utilities are doing to try and train that next generation and keep that next generation of operators. So we'll go ahead and do a round of introductions. Heather Jennings is with Probiotic Solutions. She's going to be actually joining later on in the day. So she'll be joining on. Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
Morning, everybody. I am Jim Uckel with the City of Flagstaff. I've been in the industry for about 38 years. Actually, it's 38 years this month. And just happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And my name is Don Trujillo. I'm with Garney Construction, project manager. I actually sit on the Biosolids committee as the vice chair. Be taking over for Andrea here, I guess, in August. So I was putting this together here. Been working in the wastewater industry my entire career. Personally built multiple wastewater treatment facilities in my career, and I've been now local to the Arizona market for the last 3 years now. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And I'm Andrea Odegaard-Begay. I'm a...
Oops. Oh, sorry, Andrea. I accidentally muted you. I was trying to mute myself. I am sorry.
All right, take two. I am still Andrea Odegaard-Begay. I'm a project manager and process engineer with Hazen and Sawyer here in their Goodyear office, although I'm working from home today. I've been in the water wastewater industry for over 2 decades now, doing everything from process treatment, conveyance, you name it, if it's water related, I've probably touched it in the course of my career. I'm also currently the chair of the AZ Water Biosolids Committee and the Infrastructure Council, and sit on the board for both AZ Water and Arizona section of Water Reuse Association. I will also be moderating this first session, which is related to the infrastructure bill, but also various funding opportunities for your infrastructure project. Our main speakers for this session are going to be Lindsay Jones with the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona, and Seth Robertson, who is Hazen and Sawyer's National Funding Services lead. So with that, Seth, you can take it away.
Thanks, Andrea. Appreciate it. Let me get my presentation up here really quick. So, I've spent most of my career as well in water, so about 25 years now, and about half of that, a little bit more than half of that, on the funding side of things. And I can say in all that time, this has definitely been the most interesting time period over the last year plus now that we've probably seen in infrastructure funding, even thinking back in 2009 and ERA and a number of different things that we've had. What we're seeing right now is probably the largest influx of federal money into water infrastructure since really the construction grants and loans period of the late 70s, early 80s. So it's really sort of a transformative time between all the different funding sources that have been happening. I'm going to focus on the bipartisan infrastructure bill just because that's kind of the biggest thing right now. I'm going to try to do a high level overview, and then I'm going to let Lindsay really talk about what's happening in Arizona, because I know that's what we really want to hear about is how it really impacts people in Arizona. So in doing this, I'll say I have a little bit of a unique background. As Andrea mentioned, I am the National Funding Services lead for Hazen and Sawyer, and I've worked on the consulting side, but I spent almost 15 years with the state of North Carolina administering the SRF programs there, including back in 2009 with ERA and that chunk of money that came through, and some of the same issues we're probably going to see with some of these funds. So I think I bring a little bit of unique perspective of kind of both sides of the table and trying to deal with these issues, and certainly understand, and I'm sympathetic with everything that Lindsay's going to be doing over the next several months and even several years in administering some of these funds and figuring out how to best manage those things. So just really quickly, the infrastructure bill, while it was passed last year, we've heard a lot about it, but we haven't necessarily seen a lot of the money showing up yet. And that's not because things haven't been happening. So it's $550 billion. It's a mix of programs. It's going through existing programs. It's new programs that are being created. And a lot of things have been happening. In fact, just in the last week, a little over a week ago, last Tuesday, EPA just released their guidance on the SRF portion of the funds to the states. So that's something I'm sure Lindsay will touch on is kind of what came out of that. So it has been progressing, things are happening, but I'll also say this money feels a little different than what we've seen in past stimulus bills. It's not as much of a shovel ready, make it move quickly type of funding. It is a multi-year investment process. So it's going to feel different. The timing is going to be a bit different. It is going to start moving. The money is starting to show up, and I'll talk about kind of where we're seeing it first. But it's going to take 6 months to a year before really the first money's really moving through most of the programs, and it's going to be with us for 5+ years as far as being distributed to states and other entities. And realistically, we're going to see the effects of this money probably for a decade or more. So it's something, we're really going to be working with for quite some time. So what's in the act? And it's a very big act, and just a couple of things that to mention in bill is, well, it's talked about a $1.2 trillion bill. It is, but half of that is actually reauthorization of funds. So it's about $550 billion of new funding. And out of that, about 10% of that goes into the water side of things. And I'll say these aren't necessarily clean lines. So, transportation gets a bunch, and kind of all the other major pieces, but just because water is called out doesn't mean there aren't other pieces that fall into that. So there is the water set aside. There's specific Western water money that I'll talk about that's going to be coming through Bureau of Rec. Resiliency funds can be used for some water things. There are aspects of power that also potentially could be used. So there's a number of pieces here that could come together to affect you as a water utility. So one of the things out of that 55 billion that's very different than anything I've seen is the kind of the flip and the focus on drinking water. So if you look at the SRF programs in particular, where most of this money is going to be flowing. So most of it's going to be coming through the SRF. Most of it's going to be going to, Lindsay and their group and working through how to distribute these funds. What we've always seen pretty much universally is wastewater's always gotten more money. So it typically gets more money every year. It's an older program. It's had more in the system, but this is the first time we've really seen a funding source to the SRF emphasize drinking water. And it's really in two major categories. So one is the lead service line replacement. So $15 billion of the $35 billion of drinking water is going to lead service line replacement. And this is really in response to the lead and copper rule revision. So think inventory, investigation, replacing both private and public, and then Pfas and emerging contaminants is another $9 billion. And part of that's going to go through the SRF and part of it's going to go through kind of other state means most likely. But, we're going to talk about Pfas in a subsequent session. That's obviously, it's a big deal. There's money that's going to be going into this, and it's a large source of where this funding is going to come through. And another thing is we're just going to see a just general increase in the base SRF amounts. So $11 billion on the drinking water side, that just supplements the existing SRF. And another thing that, we're going to see is where we're used to this being primarily low interest loans to the SRF, and it still is, a lot of this is going to be additional subsidy, likely in the form of principal forgiveness. And, again, I'll defer to Lindsay to talk about where Arizona is and their plans of how they're going to sort of manage those pieces. And, also responding to some of the information that came out in that guidance to states. So beyond the drinking water side, there is money going to wastewater. It's not as much overall. It's only about $13 billion. Most of that is going to just be part of the base SRF program. So 11 billion increases in there. There is some additional emerging contaminant money. So $1 billion in grant principal forgiveness funds. The EPA stormwater reuse programs getting $1 billion worth of grant money. And then there's a number of smaller programs that I'm not necessarily going to go into detail here. But just something to be aware of is while most of the funds are going to be going through existing programs like SRF, like some of the existing EPA programs like FEMA, there are a number of smaller programs that are being created. And most of those funds are probably going to show up later. The good thing about utilizing existing programs is there's processes in place. And while there's things to adapt to of what's in this act, the infrastructure is in place from the funding side of things to move that money. For some of these other smaller programs, from pilot programs to just, sort of other new emphasis, that's going to take longer because you're going to have to set the programs up first, and then you're going to have to try to move money. So while some of the first money, especially from Bureau of Rec, is starting to happen now, I think SRF is going to be following very closely behind that. We're going to see some of these other programs probably late this year, even early next year, before they really get up and moving and starting to distribute funds. And then another thing that's been particularly exciting for me is an increase in water infrastructure resiliency funding. So if you think about FEMA, which is where most of this money is going through, we've thought of FEMA in the past as mostly coming in after there's been some type of disaster event to either reimburse or to try to replace, repair infrastructure. This has been a move that's really been happening over a few years, is to start providing more of an investment into pre-disaster mitigation type funds. So we've seen that in the FEMA hazard mitigation program. That's both a flood program. It's also the BRIC grant program, which is a relatively new program. But we're starting to see more money, and we're going to see, I think, an ongoing emphasis in a number of the things that we're talking about today. So I don't think this is going to be necessarily a one-shot deal. So even if you look back at the drinking water numbers I threw out there, there are other funding sources potentially coming down the line, depending on how those things are passed spending bills. There was the Build Back Better Act, which is kind of dead the way it is right now in Congress, that would add even additional funds potentially into things like lead service lines. I think we're going to see more PFAS money coming down the line. You know, we're very early in the game for some of these things, and I think just gives us an insight in what the focus is going to be, not just right now with this money, but also sort of looking long term as an emphasis from EPA's perspective. Another thing that's continuing to get some play is cybersecurity and critical infrastructure. This becomes a bigger and bigger deal. The first time we really kind of saw this called out was probably in the ARPA funds, that there was a recommendation that those funds that were going directly to towns and cities and counties be considered for cybersecurity, especially around critical infrastructure, which includes drinking water and wastewater treatment, collection, distribution. Now there's $1 billion specifically set aside in this new bill to go towards those issues. Most of that money is going to be coming through Homeland Security from a distribution standpoint. And then we're also seeing additional money going through the National Dam Safety Program. Again, seeing continued shift in that emphasis to really removing dams from a water quality and safety standpoint, less on the repair side. And then Western Water. So the Bureau of Rec is going to get its own basically $6 to $8 billion appropriation through bill for a variety of different things. This money is actually most likely to move first. And Bureau of Rec is actually starting to move on some of these things. So this would probably be in many ways the money to pay attention to most right this moment, and to start sort of getting yourself prepared to go after some of this and to access some of this. So variety of different things here, from aging infrastructure to general improvements to conveyance and storage and rural water and a number of different things. But again, a lot of existing programs here, existing sources, so it should be able to move pretty quickly. And then just talking really briefly about administration and why, you know, what Lindsay does is so important is the two sort of main categories here outside of Bureau of Rec, which is it's really its own entity of where that goes and how that moves, is through the SRF and through FEMA, and they work differently. So obviously familiar with the SRF program in Arizona, that you're going to work directly with them. They're going to work with EPA. The way this money will flow is through sort of the typical capitalization grant process, which is how they get funded every year and have up until now. So it'll use similar processes. It's just going to have some different requirements, some different administration issues, obviously those specific set asides for different things that everyone's trying to work through right now, what that's going to look like and what those new conditions are going to be, especially things like Buy American and what impacts those are going to have. But that's going to be flowing over a 5-year period, basically into the SRF programs. And that's kind of how you're going to access that. FEMA and their funds, for example, if you look at something like BRIC, it works differently. So you generally are working as sort of a combination, both with your state emergency management agency and FEMA. The state emergency management agencies will basically gather projects that are an emphasis for them for sub applicants, and then they'll take those and apply for the money from FEMA, and it'll kind of pass through, and you'll be working with both. But it's a different setup, it's a different process. You're working with different agencies, so just kind of be familiar with the different way these things are kind of going to flow at the end of the day. And this is kind of the big overview of this funding. Again, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of things that are changing. Things are coming out every day, so there's a lot of excitement about what we're going to see. Be patient with it. Be patient with state agencies. Be patient with federal agencies. They're dealing with a lot as they're trying to work through these details. Just know that progress is being made. The money is coming, and we're going to see some effects of it hopefully sooner rather than later. And now I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay to talk specifically about what's happening in Arizona and how is this going to work from an SRF perspective.
Thanks so much, Seth. Yeah, I think that was a great introduction to what is, the big high level picture of what bill funding is all about. Just sharing my screen. One sec here. You able to see it?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as Seth mentioned and Andrea kind of introduced me, I am Lindsay Jones. I work for the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, or WIFA, and we are Yep, definitely staying very busy with all of this new money coming in. So before I talk more about the bill funding specifically, I figured it'd be good to give just kind of a quick overview of Wifa, make sure everyone understands what we do as a SRF and who is eligible, what kind of projects are eligible. So we manage the state revolving fund, which is basically getting grant funds from EPA, which we pass along as loans to our borrowers. And our real goal is to maintain and improve the water quality in Arizona and provide the financial and technical assistance that's needed to have all of our water and wastewater needs met. So just real quick, SRF eligible borrower. So it's going to be really any cities, towns, tribal entities, special districts, as long as you own a community public water system, own a publicly owned wastewater facility, or you're managing stormwater. We can also borrow money to privately owned drinking water companies. Really the main group that we can't lend money to is private wastewater. So that's who is eligible. As far as what is eligible, it's really anything related to water, just about. If we can make that connection that it's helping improve drinking water sources, helping to keep clean wastewater, anything including reuse or stormwater, watershed protection projects. If it's related to water in some way, we most likely can find an eligibility for it. And we can fund all the phases of the project, from acquisitions, planning and design stages, all the way through the construction. So I'm just going to briefly go over what we can offer as far as our program. So we are a loan program. We offer below market interest rates. We have flexible loan terms up to 30 years, and we often can offer some grant-like principal forgiveness for the loans that we provide. We also pair that with technical assistance, so we can assist, just with the basic application process. And then we can also help to pay for some of the planning and design costs for small and disadvantaged communities, or we can help to pay to assist our borrowers with complying with some of the federal requirements like Davis-Bacon, what is right now American Iron and Steel, and as Seth kind of mentioned, will soon become the Buy American requirements. So we're able to assist with, helping with the compliance with those requirements. Some of the options we offer, we do have design loans, which are 3-year loan terms with a flat 1% interest rate. So you're only making interest payments for 3 years, and then principal's due at the end of that. Then that helps to get projects really going, and it's very, inexpensive option to get the design phase complete. As I mentioned, we can do up to 30 years for loans. And with the one caveat being it can't exceed the useful life of the financed infrastructure. For larger projects, you could always have the option of splitting it into several loans, which is what the town of Payson did with their C.C. Cragen project, where they borrowed almost $50 million. They got about $6 million in forgivable, and they split that into 5 different loans. So lots of flexibility on the options for the loan terms. We also, like I said, provide forgivable principal. So right now what our policy is for forgivable is for clean water projects, which are the wastewater and stormwater projects. If the community is eligible to be classified as disadvantaged, we can do up to 50% of the project costs. Or if they're doing green projects, any water or energy efficiency projects, reuse and reclaim projects, or stormwater projects, we could do up to 20%. And that's really just subject to availability and the priority list that we have. So that's our current policy. And again, I'll get later a few slides from now get into the bill funding and how some of this is going to be changing. On the drinking water side, we also have forgivable principal. It does work a little differently, where basically we have 3 different tiers, which are more or less generous, just based on economic need and the public health benefits. You know, so if they're disadvantaged and addressing a public health threat, we're going to be able to offer the most forgivable principal. And then the second tier is either disadvantaged or public health threat. And the third tier is for all infrastructure projects. So on that side, we can be a little more generous, just because typically we've had a little more forgivable that we've been able to work with. So next, I'm going to discuss the specifics around the bill funding. But first, I did want to just give a definition of how we classify communities as disadvantaged. So it does happen during the application process when a applicant puts in their initial project priority list application. We will score it and determine if they can be classified as disadvantaged. So it's going to be based on affordability. You know, if your community has low median household income and then they have high water or wastewater rates and a high level of existing debt, most likely it'll come back showing that you'd be classified as disadvantaged, and that would make you eligible for more forgivable principal. Or if the community is colonia, then it's automatically classified as disadvantaged. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which I think, you know, Seth did a great job at giving some of the overview of that. So it's commonly referred to now as the bill. It was referred to as the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, but it is definitely a huge influx in funding that it's going to be available to Wifa. So we have certainly been very busy in trying to get lots of policies and procedures in place to get prepared for this. So yeah, I mean, the major goals that the EPA has for this money is to target the resources to disadvantaged communities. I think you'll see that once we get into who is eligible to get the forgivable principal from all of these new funds that are coming in. And then obviously a big goal for the president and for EPA is to remove all lead service lines from our system. So that is going to be getting a lot of specific funding to have lead service line replacement projects and tackling those forever chemicals such as Pfas. So specifically for Arizona's SRF, out of the bill funding, basically we're going to be getting 5 new pots of money. So on the clean water side, just the supplemental fund, so that'd be eligible for any project that is eligible for clean water SRF funding. This next coming year, we're going to get about $12 million, and that's in addition to our base funding. So it'll be a big addition, and that is going to be mandated to have us provide 49% of it. So about $6 million will be available as forgivable principal, and that will only be eligible to disadvantaged communities or projects, green projects. And then on the drinking water side, we're going to have an additional $32 million about for Arizona for the next year. And that again is 49% has to be given out as forgivable principal, and that is only to disadvantaged communities. So this is just the upcoming year. And again, this is going to be, it's an annual appropriation for the next 5 years. So multiply these numbers by 5, and that's what we're getting overall. So as mentioned, there's also going to be specific money for the lead service line replacement fund. Obviously, that's just going to be going to the drinking water SRF funds. So it's going to be about $50 million coming to Arizona SRF for 2022. And that's to do full lead service line replacements. It can't be for partial replacements, but it could also include, you know, anything from planning, identification, design, inventories to comply with the revised lead and copper rule. And then again, though, they are making it a requirement that all of the forgivable that we're able to offer, which is 49% of that 50 million, so about 25 million will be available as forgivable, but all of that will be having to go to disadvantaged communities. And then we have the Emerging Contaminant Fund. So that will have funds going into both the drinking water and clean water side. On the clean water side, it's not a ton of funding. It's about 600,000 in 2022. Starting in 2023, it'll be about $1 million, and that'll continue for the next 4 years. So it's not a ton on the clean water side. It will be available as 100% forgivable principal, and there's no restrictions for the clean water emerging contaminant funds on if it has to go to disadvantaged or not. So pretty much anyone is eligible if you're doing a Pfas project. We've also talked with EPA about other possible uses, especially on the clean water side. I know we have a project right now with Flagstaff where we're doing helping to pay for the forest thinning project, and they seem to think that that could be eligible for the clean water emerging contaminant funds because it really helps to protect the watershed from a variety of contaminants that would possibly occur after catastrophic wildfires. So we could definitely be as imaginative and try to push the boundaries of what we could use that for, as long as it's addressing some sort of emerging contaminant. On the drinking water side, it's a little bit more generous. We have about 13 million coming in 2022. Again, it's 100% forgivable. We do have to use 25% of that at least for disadvantaged communities on the drinking water side. They are certainly focused on us using it for any PFAS remediation projects, but they have also called out the contaminant candidate list, CCL5. So any contaminants of concern that are currently unregulated that are on that list that people are wanting to treat for could be eligible for this funding. And then really the big next steps. So as Seth mentioned, we just recently got the bill implementation memo from EPA. So we have been waiting for that for quite some time. It just recently got released. So we are trying to work as quickly as possible now to create all the policies and procedures based on the guidance that was provided in the implementation memo, and just how the funding will work, and more specifically how the new forgivable principal procedures will work and how the percentages are going to be allocated for different projects. We also have the new Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA, which is, across the board for all federal funding programs now. But for Wifa, we have, we've known that this is coming now, but we're still waiting for guidance from the Office of Management and Budget. OMB is newly in charge of this program, so I think they are also kind of scrambling to get guided, figure out what guidance to provide. It will go into effect starting, I believe it's May 14th. So it's, definitely coming soon. And it basically means pretty much all construction material is going to have to be domestically produced, similar to how right now we have the American iron and steel. So it'll be beyond iron and steel. It'll be, pretty much all construction materials. So we're hoping that they will have some flexibility in this requirement, have possibly some waivers that we can apply, but that's still very unknown at this time. But the major next step, I think, for all of our communities to make sure that they are securing the funding for themselves is we need people to submit project priority list applications. So in the guidance implementation memo that EPA released, they made it very clear that Wifa will only, and all the other SRFs will only be able to apply for the funds which are equaling what we have in projects on our priority list. So we typically have our intended use plan, which we do the beginning of every fiscal year. That is submitted with our capitalization grant application. As long as we have enough projects on there to show that we have the need, we should be able to get awarded the full funding. But we certainly have some concerns that we're not going to be able to show the need if we don't have people applying, especially for the lead service line funds. Honestly, we've been talking to people trying to see what kind of need is out there. We know there's a lot of need for inventories, but we're going to have $50 million per year for the next 5 years. So that's a lot of inventory money. So the main point I want to end with was really that we need people to submit applications now. The deadline to be included on our intended use plan is May 16th. So if you have projects that are coming up in the next year, get on our list early. It's not going to be binding you to, go through with anything right away. It's just a way to get on our priority list so that Wifa can also make sure we secure the fundings that will be needed for our communities. So just 2 last slides, just so everyone is aware of the application process. As I mentioned, we have our project priority list application that can be accessed online through our website, so azwifa.gov. It's a pretty simple, just high-level details of the project. Doesn't take too long to complete. Once that's done, then you can work on the next steps, which are getting the debt authorization. We would send the full project finance application after that. Once we get it approved by our board, then we'd work towards loan closing and having the loan executed, and the funds would be then available. So I just wanted to end with those few steps. If anyone is interested in applying, like I said, we really need lots of applications to show that we have the need in Arizona to be able to take advantage of all the bill funds coming through. And like Seth mentioned, hopefully people are fairly patient with us because we are trying to work quickly. This is, a lot of funds, a lot of new requirements coming. We expect our funds to be available for this. The bill funds usually will be available sometime after the fiscal year. So early fall of 2022 is when we expect it. So that is all I have, and can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Seth and Lindsay. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type it in the chat or raise your hand. And if we're not paying attention to you, then go ahead and unmute and speak up. We want to make sure we get all questions answered. And we've got about 15 minutes until our next session, which is going to go into more detail on those emergent contaminants that Lindsay had mentioned in her presentation. But if no one has anything, I do have a couple that I jotted down when we were speaking. And just to comment that I really appreciate the acronym BABA. It's going to be one of my favorites here. So regarding these projects, do they need to have already been identified in utility CIPs, or if it's something that came up recently and that's not already in their capital improvement program or budgeting process, can they still add that or apply for that on the priority list?
Yeah, for Wifa, that's not a requirement at all. We don't need it to be on their CIP. We do have options for CIP financing where someone could submit their entire CIP and we can, get all of the projects approved for financing. So that helps, some communities when they have a lot of projects they need funding for. But yeah, it certainly does not need to be on the CIP to apply.
Okay. And then it sounded, you already answered this largely, but it sounded like a pretty straightforward process, at least the initial step to get on that priority list, which is going to be critical to obtaining funding. So are we really just looking at like what is entailed in that actual application? Just an overview of the project, potential project cost, impact to community? Like what are we?
Yeah, so I mean, it is very high level. It asks for, you have to create a login, just put in some basic information. We want things like, the median household income, the level of debt, the rates users are paying, because like I said, that'll help us to determine if we can classify the system as disadvantaged, and then ask for, what is the problem you're facing and what's the solution you're proposing. We asked a few just general questions about where you are in the process, as far as, have you started design? Do you have a engineer on contract? Things like that. And then just give us the best estimate of the cost. And again, this is something, if you're very early on in the phase and you just have a ballpark figure, that's fine. We can work with that for now. It's not until we get to the second application, the project finance application, where we really need more detailed cost estimates. So that's the major things. That the one other thing in the project priority list is we have our environmental review checklist, which helps us to understand what level of environmental review will be necessary, if it's going to be eligible for a categorical exclusion, or if we're going to have to do a further environmental assessment, which, like I mentioned, we have some technical assistance funds we can help to pay for doing environmental assessments. So.
Okay, so that was kind of my next question. When we're submitting for this priority list, this application, that can include all types and levels of projects, from initial planning phase through construction. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the process, you can apply for that.
Yeah.
That next level, initiation, or, we need help completing.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, we do have design loans. So that's one of the questions in the PPL is, do you want this to be a construction loan or just a design only loan? If it's design only, then it's, pretty great loan terms with the 1% flat interest rate and 3-year loan terms. And then what we typically see is people will roll that into a construction loan after they get the design completed.
Okay. We do have a couple questions in the chat. One is, does value engineering need to be a part of the process?
No, I mean, to be honest, I'm not even really sure what value engineering is. So I'm going to say no. I don't know, Seth, if you, with your experience with the SRFs.
No, so value engineering as a whole is generally not, and that's basically looking through a design and trying to come up with ways to save money. But I mean, generally, and I don't want to speak for Lindsay, when you're doing the alternatives evaluation, you are going to be taking into account the value and the cost of different alternatives, both from a true cost standpoint and an environmental standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If Jim, you can give me a thumbs up if that answered your question, or if not, we can circle back around to that. Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. And then second question, does Wifa have a definition of green projects for the clean water SRF?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of guidance documents, so I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out to me, I can provide. We have fact sheets, and there's longer PDFs with all sorts of examples. EPA has great information on their Clean Water SRF website that defines really what green projects are. Typically, we're looking at things that are saving at least 20% of the water energy, 20% savings on water energy efficiencies. A lot of times, our most common green projects have been adding solar panels to wastewater treatment systems, to save on energy costs for them, but also just helps to make it a more sustainable project. So.
And does that process include, when you're applying, you have an estimate of what you could potentially save, what your energy savings could be, what makes this green, and then a verification at the end? I mean, it may not be exact, but that it's close and kind of. Okay.
Right. Yeah, we do want some sort of documentation that shows, like, for example, this is how much energy we use. This is how much energy a solar panel, addition would provide, and it shows the savings on that end. So.
Okay. And I had a question specific to now disadvantaged communities. There was a lot of information provided. When we're talking about communities, is that, you know, utility or a city town overall, or is it, could it be a project that's specific to this specific area that is seeing a disadvantaged area of a larger community, that this project is going to address issues there?
Yeah, it could be both. We have done both before. Typically, we look at the, you know, city or town overall. But if there's specific projects, you know, if there's a city that's not disadvantaged, but they're doing a project specifically for an area to help a, you know, a smaller community within that large city with a project, and we can look at the MHI and all of the other information for that smaller community and classify them as disadvantaged, then we could also provide the extra forgivable principal. I know we did something similar, something like that for a town, the town of Marana, who is helping a disadvantaged community within their system on a project, and we're able to provide some forgivable principal to them, even though Marana wasn't classified as disadvantaged.
And I could definitely see that applying potentially for like the lead service line replacement type work. If you've got area where you're clearly doing work for, you know, low income, disadvantaged population, but then wherever that's at as part of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Then with respect to the size of loans, obviously there's debt authorization, or there's a financial component. You're evaluating whether an entity has the ability to repay and is able to afford a specific size loan. But apart from that, you know, are there any limitations or restrictions on the size of a loan? Does it need to be, can it only be a certain percentage of the overall project cost, or can an entity apply for a loan that encompasses an entire project cost? And particularly because there's a finite amount of funding available, right? I mean, if it's first come, first serve.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a theoretical limit. Wifa has not ever been approached by anyone that has met that theoretical limit where we've had to say no because it's too much. So we've done everything from, you know, 20,000 to 100 million. Wifa is a leverage program. So basically we have the option to go out and borrow more money because we have, you know, such a great credit rating. We're able to still pass on those savings. I know some other states don't do that. So their funds are more limited to what they actually have coming from the capitalization grants and loan repayments. But we do have the option where we can go out and leverage our funds, get more funds if needed, if we're seeing a great need. Obviously, with all the new bill infrastructure funds, we're not thinking that's going to be necessary for the next several years, but it is always an option if we see a great need come in.
And you mentioned the May deadline is critical to get on that priority list, because then otherwise we'll need to wait another year to get on the next list and funding for the next.
So, I mean, we do accept applications year round. We want to get as many people on our intended use plan so we could apply for the full grant amounts right away. They did make it clear in the implementation memo that there could be a possibility that, you know, say we get 20 million lead service line replacement projects apply. We could apply for the 20 million now, and as the year goes on, if we get more applications come in that meet the rest of that, we could apply for the rest. We do also have the option to wait 1 year to apply for the funding that's available this year, so we could delay applying for it if we don't get any right now. But we do want to, you know, try to take advantage of all the resources that are being provided and apply for the full amounts if we have people that are actually needing those projects done. So getting applications in by mid-May, would be ideal for us.
So, and then with respect to like the larger funding arena, are there any other imminent deadlines that folks online should be aware of?
Not that I can think of. Yeah, I mean, it's We
I mean,
have,
outside of SRF, I
Right.
mean, Bureau of Rec does have some of their grant programs that are open or will be opening soon. Some of the FEMA funds, they generally are taking applications in the second half of the year. So it really depends upon the program. So I guess if there's any recommendation I would have is start figuring out what your needs are sooner rather than later to figure out what the potential funding programs would be that could match up for those so that you can start planning out both the application timeline and what you have to do to be ready to apply. Because again, every program is different of where you kind of need to be in the process and then how long the funding process will take once you start there.
All right, and then the
I see.
final question, or a couple questions
Yep.
were, oh, no, all right. We're running out of time, so quickly, is it all right if I pass on your contact information? We've had some folks that are interested in having you present
Yeah.
to their management teams.
Yep,
Right?
absolutely.
I assumed it was yes, but I thought I'd
Yes.
double check. And then
Oh,
final
yeah.
question before we go to break is there a limit on how many projects entity can submit?
No, we can do, some people just submit one project at a time. Like I said, though, we can also do CIP financing where you submit your whole CIP, or if you want to just submit a portion of the CIP projects. I'm working on a project right now for someone or a loan right now for someone, and they have about 15 projects within that loan. So it's really flexible on whatever your needs are.
All right. That was our final question, and it takes us just about to our break time. So I really appreciate you jumping on this morning and participating with us. And we'll be passing along your contact information. So don't be surprised if you get some emails from utilities interested in having you present.
All right. Excellent.
I was
Thank you,
looking for
Ann.
a little like hand clapping icon reaction, but I didn't see that. So.
Thank you, Andrea, for hosting. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Seth, for participating. We
Sure.
really appreciate your time. A lot of good information. To the rest of the group, we'll take a little 10-minute break here. I do have a clock, should start if I can do this right. But yeah, let's try and get back here, give you 10 minutes, a little bit about 5 after the hour, try and head on back in, and we'll be moving into our next subject, which will be PFAS. So thank you, everyone, and we'll take a quick break here. So. You won't believe how long it took me to figure out the clock thing. It works now.
Looks pretty cool.
Except now we really only have 7 minutes. So.
as we start welcoming people back, we've got about 2 more minutes before we get kick started on our next session. Thank you, everybody, to once again the presenters and the moderators on the first session here. We'll be moving into our second session. Once again, it's just general housekeeping. Everyone did a great job. Please just keep yourself muted. Please type any questions you have in the chat. I think that went really well. And we'll get started. Heather Jennings, who I introduced earlier, she'll be the moderator and host for the next session here. So she'll be taking over here in just about a minute or so. Okay, everybody, as the clock winds down for our 10-minute break, hopefully everyone got a chance to give me a thumbs up or on your to make sure we got everybody back here. But we'll go ahead and kickstart and get to our second session here. We got 10 minutes left, or actually 10 seconds left. So. Once again, we appreciate your time, and we do appreciate all of our presenters' time. So we'll move forward into session 2. Heather, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. We're really excited to have you join us. This is a discussion, as we mentioned, on Pfas, some treatment, some where does it go afterwards. And I wanted to introduce our 3 panelists. Our first one is Kelsey Hakes, with the Sales and Business Development Engineer with Aqueous Vets. I'm sorry, I slaughtered that.
You're good. It's a tongue twister.
And we have Kathy Swanson, the Environmental Sustainability Segment Manager for Purolite. And we have Jeff Pravat, who is the Deputy Director for Treatment, Research, and Innovation, with over 25 years in the wastewater industry, and is currently engaged in PFAS transport, fate risk assessment in biosolids. So with that, let's get started. Let's have a discussion. I know several of you are, Kelsey, you had some slides you wanted me to share. So let me pull those up real quick.
Sure, that'd be great.
And I'll even start it from the beginning. How's that?
That's always good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, one sec. My computer actually just sent it to the very end. Here we go. All right, let me know if you see this accurately, and then we'll take you all the way back to the top. All right. I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. I can see your, oh, there you go. Perfect. And then you just want me to let you know when to switch slides? Okay, perfect. Okay, so real quick, Aqueous Vets, basically what we do is we manufacture the filtration equipment, single pass media, typically granular activated carbon systems or ion exchange resin systems. So when you guys are looking at this contaminant and what your treatment options, the main media choices or the most economical media choices or treatment choices are going to be either looking at the ion exchange resin media or granular activated carbon treatment systems. There is a new media out there that has been pilot tested and shown some very good results called Fluorosorb. I don't have too much in this presentation, but if we want to talk about it afterwards, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. So what you kind of want to look at is, the factors are, what are you treating for as far as short chains versus long chains? What's the other competing organics and inorganics in your water? Because with PFAS, you're talking about parts per trillion, but with a lot of these other contaminants in your water, it's in parts per billion or even parts per million. So they play a big factor in how long that media is going to last. Evaluating your capital costs versus your operational costs. Your operational costs are going to obviously outweigh your capital costs over the life cycle. So really making sure you're honing in not only on the media change out frequency, but also even evaluating the mechanical design of the system. There are different options out there. So just understanding those differences can be critical in choosing a path forward for your project. Next slide, please. Is it perfect? So just quickly touching on some of the key differences between those medias. GAC, very familiar, tried and true technology out in the industry. What you're going to see different when it's related to PFAS removal is you need 2 times as much contact time as other typical contaminants we're treating in our water currently today. So a minimum 10-minute empty bed contact time. And what empty bed contact time is basically the volume of media you need inside that pressure vessel. So since you need 10 minutes contact time, that's a pretty large empty bed contact time, you're typically going to have very tall vessels. So this image on the bottom right here shows you a 12-foot diameter vessel. This system, lead lag pair, can treat up to 1,000 GPM, and you can see the overall height is about almost 23 feet to accommodate that added volume. Typically, you're using a bituminous coal carbon for this application. They found that coconut carbons just don't work or don't last quite as long as the bituminous coal carbons. Go ahead with the next slide. So the good thing is that there's been a lot of data produced over the last few years. So you have a lot of options out there for what you can do before even getting to design as far as preliminary outlooks on the media and which media you're going to go to move forward with. You can do what's known as an RSSET, that is an in-lab test. So this is just a few of those RSSET's data. And you could also talk to your neighboring water agencies to see if they've conducted some of these tests and what their water quality looks at, to see if there's some similarities there for you to kind of correlate how the medias would do with your site as well. Go ahead with the next slide. And there's already many full-scale installations, even in Arizona with City of Tucson. They're doing a dual application for peroxide quenching and PFAS removal. City of Marana is using granular activated carbon for PFAS removal and peroxide quenching. So there are a lot of sites already in full scale, up and running, using carbon to treat for PFAS removal out there. So there are example sites that you can reach out to and learn, their design practices and see any lessons learned that they've gone through their process. So moving on to ion exchange resin, how that differs from the granular activated carbon is it requires a lot less empty bed contact time. So if you remember, carbon was 10 minutes empty bed contact time. Typically, I'm seeing with ion exchange resin that people design to 2 to 3 minutes per vessel. What that means is you need about 5 times less volume of media in that same size vessel. So typically, you can get away with much shorter vessels. So looking at the system drawing in the bottom right, so that system height is about 16 feet. And remember, if the carbon system was about 23 feet, so significantly shorter. Also, an advantage of ion exchange resin is you can allow a lot more flow rate through a single system size. So where that carbon system was 1,000 GPM for a 12-foot diameter vessel, that same 12-foot diameter vessel can actually go up to 2,000 GPM for ion exchange resin. So what that means is basically typically with resins versus carbons, with the resin systems are going to be a bit smaller in footprint and shorter, and the carbon systems will be a bit larger. I'd say the disadvantage of the ion exchange resin is it does produce more head loss than the carbon treatment system. So evaluating those energy costs in comparison to the carbon, and also looking at your pump curves and making sure that you don't need any upgrades to your pump or require any boosting if you were to go down the ion exchange resin route. It's nice that the resin is actually a selective media where carbon absorbs all organics in your water. So you are using what's known as a Pfas selective resin, or really in a lot of cases, it's a perchlorate selective resin that is being used also for PFAS removal as well. Go ahead with next slide. And there are many installations for ion exchange resin systems. The nice thing of it being about with the PFAS selective resin really originating from a perchlorate selective resin is that there's many installations for perchlorate treatment, actually mostly in California, in Southern California from the contamination for it there, which means it's tried and true to the industry as well. You guys in Arizona, you guys have not seen the need as California has for a single pass ion exchange resin. You guys typically use resins for nitrate, but that is a different type of system in that you are doing on-site regeneration, or even if you've used resin for arsenic, that is also, I think, an off-site regeneration resin. So this is single use, which means you basically send it to an incineration facility, and then you'll be using virgin resin with each change out. Just basically kind of like you do with carbon, in the sense you're receiving back virgin material after it's spent. But some of the locations that have already moved forward with ion exchange resin, I've mostly been in California as far as nearest location to Arizona. There is an ion exchange resin system going in with the city of Tempe we're currently manufacturing, but it has not been installed yet. It's under production. So go ahead to the next slide.
Sorry, my computer's being just a little reluctant.
No problem.
There we go.
And even though there is in-lab testing methods for granular activated carbon, there currently isn't an ASTM method for ion exchange resins. So you can always go down the route of piloting, comparing the two medias to one another, or even comparing products to one another, because there's several manufacturers out there for resins, and there's several manufacturers out there for carbons as well. And depending on your water quality is going to change the results on which is going to be the better selection for your site. The water quality is the most important factor, I would say, in finding out what product is best for your individual site. So go ahead, next slide. And then last slide, just showing you a kind of comparison between the ion exchange resin and granular activated carbon. There's benefits to both, but it's really evaluating your individual site and your project needs. Typically, I find that if you've got a very small footprint site, ion exchange resin is the better selected media because you just don't need as large of equipment or as many systems for higher flow rates. If someone's trying to avoid pump upgrades and looking for less head loss, you could go with granular activated carbon. When you have dual applications like a city of Tucson or city of Marana, where they use the carbon for peroxide quenching downstream of their UV AOP system, they make it a dual application system where they're also treating for PFAS. And then Resin also offers you a performance guarantee, which is great because it is a selective media. It's a lot easier to model it to accurate predictions on the bed life. Whereas with carbon, since it absorbs, all organics in your water, your TOC levels are going to play a large factor in how long that carbon is going to last. And as you know, TOC is a makeup of thousands of organics. And so they all have different absorption rates. So a concentration, while it's good to have, doesn't really tell us enough to say how it's going to interact with that carbon and how it's going to affect that carbon life. And I think next slide, and I think that's it. Tried to be quick there, so if there's any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Kelsey. And I'm really sorry about that not advancing properly. Kathy, you have some slides. Do you want to share them directly, or would you like me to pull them up? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I can share them directly.
Okay.
It might be easier that way.
There you go.
Let me. Of course, it's at the end. Okay. That's the wrong one, actually. My apologies. Okay. Good. All right. All right. PFAS. And it's interesting. I've had a lot of people say to me, why do we care? It's part per trillion. Like every time they come up with a new measurement, we get a new regulation is how some people feel. And I understand that. I mean, we are talking about part per trillion levels. The problem is it's bioaccumulative and environmentally persistent. That's why we call it forever chemicals. It does accumulate in the blood. Basically, everybody on this call probably a pretty good chance that you have PFAS in your system. And why do we care about that? It's because there's a lot of documented health effects when it comes to PFAS. The European Environmental Agency put this graphic together. I think it's extremely effective. The ones with the solid lines are the higher certainty. The dashed lines are lower certainty. But there's quite a lot of health effects that PFAS can have. So I realize that not everybody on the call is looking at drinking water, but at the end of the day, the EPA is also looking at PFAS regulations for discharge permits. And, of course, we're going to be talking about biosolids. If we can keep it out of the drinking water and take it out of the source there, then we don't have to worry about it on the biosolid side either. What the trend has been over the years is to regulate to lower levels and to regulate more and more PFAS. Hawaii came out and they regulate 18, I suppose they have health advisories for 18 different PFAS compounds right now. Interesting. So I work for Purolite. Purolite is an ion exchange manufacturer. And I also believe very strongly in the ion exchange as a solution for PFAS. Couple different reasons, and Kelsey touched on some of them. It is a smaller footprint. It's effective at long and more effective than other technologies at short chain. You don't have any liquid waste during operation. And at the end of the day, everybody speaks wallet. It's going to, as Kelsey said, it's going to depend on your water quality. There are some waters that it's cheaper to use GAC, But really taking a look at that and figuring out what's best for your system, we generally find that ion exchange is a lower cost operationally, as well as from a capital perspective. So we have a PFAS selective single-use ion exchange resin. It can take PFAS out to non-detect. One of the nice things about this resin is that the other background ions in the water, sulfate, nitrate, chlorides, etc., if we have that information, we can model with extreme accuracy how long that resin is going to last. We do have a design guideline book. Give me a shout if you'd like a copy of this. It's not a book, it's a brochure, but it's pretty helpful in trying to figure out how to treat in a system. Some people have done RSSCT studies with comparing ion exchange and GAC. This is one site in Arizona. This was done by Carollo. And what they found with this particular water quality, that the ion exchange resin gave them almost 10 times more life in terms of time. There are numerous installations in at least half the states in the country, including Arizona. And this is one example right here. This is at the Air Force Air Base Luke. And so they put in a system to treat drinking water. So that's been up and operating, gosh, time flies, but it's been at least within the last year. As Kelsey mentioned, there's a couple more going in Tucson and Tempe. So definitely experience within the state. This is a stormwater treatment system. This is in Howell, Michigan. So this is a little 100 GPM system. It's basically a couple of vessels on a trailer. And it's been running for over 2 years without a change out. And so it's pretty affordable from the standpoint of a little portable mobile treatment system. That was my little bit. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Jeff, would you like to share with us a little bit about your experience with PFAS?
Hi, how is everyone? Yeah, so
Great.
here in Pima County, we let me try to share my video as well. It keeps changing screens on me when I hover over it. It's a nice trick. Here in Pima County, we are very cognizant of some of the challenges that our local communities have been having with PFAS. And so we all know that we have PFAS in our groundwater systems, especially if you're located near a previous military installation or an Air Force base. And so one of the questions we had was, did the PFAS in our groundwater system get there solely from seepage, or were wastewater treatment facilities a contributing factor discharging to our waterways, and also our biosolids that we've been land deploying for the last 40 years here in Pima County, predominantly in the Marana Farms, just north of our city, all the way up to Casa Grande. And so in 2020, the Board of Supervisors, we took a 1-year hiatus on land application of biosolids and to do a study to determine what the impacts of our activities have been over the last 40 years. And so we selected land application sites that have received biosolids at different intervals over the last 20 to 30 years and at different loading rates. And what we did is we sampled down the top 6 feet of soil. We went 1 foot, 3 foot, and 6 foot intervals to look at what the PFAS concentrations would be. Like was mentioned previously, the levels we're looking at in drinking water are typically parts per trillion. In biosolids, they're going to be parts per billion levels. And so in doing so, we were able to sample, I think in total, over 100 locations. And to our great satisfaction, we were able to demonstrate that PFAS, for the most part, all the compounds we measure, we think we measured 16 compounds in total, small chains, short chains, and long chains. And they were largely attenuated within the first 6 feet, almost 95% attenuation in the first 6 feet, which demonstrated there wasn't a lot of migration through the soil column. And with our groundwater levels here along the Santa Cruz River, typically, I'd say 100 to 200 foot in depth, we were fairly confident that it was not a contributing factor to PFAS in our groundwater systems. And so based on that study, we did a report that's been published, and it's available on our website for any of the other communities to review. We also did an academic paper in conjunction with the University of Arizona, and that's been widely accepted as well. Since then, we've also started a nationwide survey to do similar work. We have national organizations such as CASA, the California Association of Sewer Agencies, and NEBRA, Northeast Biosolids Association, EPA, and Water Research Foundation. So right now we have 2 nationwide research projects going on. One is doing soil sampling at utilities all throughout the nation, so we can characterize different soil types, different loading rates, and get a better assessment for how well PFAS is migrating from biosolids into soils and possibly into groundwater systems. And then there's the EPA study that's looking at all emerging contaminants, how they transport, what the ultimate fate is, and doing a risk assessment study. And the EPA study just kicked off last month. We had our kickoff call. And so that'll be a 2-year study as well. From a pre-treatment standpoint, I think a lot of communities already have a good handle on looking for sources of PFAS in their communities. I think for the most part, we're all dealing with legacy pollution from the aqueous film forming foams and previous generation use of PFAS compounds. For the pre-treatment standpoint, I think everybody's doing quite a good job at monitoring these. And with that being said, I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. And so for any communities that are still doing land application or even landfilling, I know in California in 2025, there's the prohibition on landfilling of biosolids. So for those small communities, they're going to have to do an alternative approach and either drying those biosolids or taking them to a regional location. And so it just creates challenges for all of us as utilities, how to cope with these emerging contaminants. PFAS is one of them. I think in the new UCMR 5s, lithium is going to be on the list. And, you look around your desk, your earbuds that you listen to music on, your cell phone, your Bluetooth radio, automobiles, there's so much lithium ion batteries out there right now. And that's something that we'll be looking at in pre-treatment programs in the coming years. How are these items being disposed of in your community? And is it the next PFAS wave of emerging contaminants we need to look at? But I'll be happy to answer any questions about our project, and if you want to view our reports or the academic work that we've been doing with EPA or WRF, I'll be happy to share that information with anybody.
Thank you, Jeff, Kathy, and Kelsey. So we're going to open this up now to questions from the participants. And we've got a few seed questions as well, just to kind of start us off. And Jeff, if you have an opportunity to just put a link in the notes in the chat, that would be awesome. So I guess, Kelsey, I guess one of the questions I want to ask you is, how has the supply chain been working for you with all the disruptions that we've had? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
That's always helpful to be off mute. Yeah, obviously that's a challenge, not only as a vendor, but also for a lot of the general contractors we work for on site. I think anything you can do to pre-procure is definitely recommended. And that's the direction I'm seeing a lot of projects go. At these treatment sites, typically the treatment system itself is the longest lead item. So what I've seen owners do is they will put out a preliminary long-term lead time package where they'll purchase the equipment while they're designing the site, because the size of the equipment is really based on flow rate, and it's predetermined in many ways. So you can go out and buy the equipment while you finish design, kind of working in parallel to kind of mitigate those extra lead time issues that people are finding in the supply chain. And also just being aware, not even from the treatment system perspective, that other factors on your site from a construction standpoint may become long lead items, like pumps. I know pumps have definitely gotten up there. So any pump upgrades or anything like that. So I'd say communicating with your design consulting firm and communicating with the GCs and the vendors to see where their pinch points are and what we can pre-procure to help mitigate those issues is always a good direction to go in, because there are those issues with supply chains. A perfect example is valves, for example. So valves we used to get in 4 to 6 weeks, no issues. You're seeing valves now come in 18 to 20 weeks. So significant increase in lead times. We've learned to mitigate that in that, typically we'd wait to buy the valves till further in the process. Now we buy them as soon as we get purchase orders with the owners. So pre-procuring, even as a vendor, when we do get the PO, we're going to try to buy as many of the materials up front so that we can mitigate those lead time issues.
Got it. Yeah, I know I'm hearing at a water show and people are talking about that, just the lead times and how long it takes to get things. That's important to kind of think about. Kathy, you mentioned or had on your slides just some costs associated with the gallons of water and stuff. Can you give us a little more information on that?
So those costs, of course, are based on water quality. If you have higher organics, the GAC is going to be used up quicker. If you have higher sulfates, an ion exchange resin is going to get consumed more quickly. Those costs were developed for turnkey exchange, so that includes service and disposal. And so it's wrapped it up into basically how often you have to change out the media and how many gallons you've treated. That's the basis for it.
Got it. Yeah, some sources are better than others, obviously.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Jeff, I was really interested as well as when you talked about the biosolids and some drying them out and some putting them other places. With it not having migration as much, is it still a viable way to dispose of the solids once we've got them?
I think it's biosolids land application, I think, has numerous environmental benefits. PFAS was just one thing to look at. Years ago, we were worried about heavy metals in biosolids, and through pre-treatment programs, we curtailed the amount of heavy metals in biosolids very effectively. And I think the same with PFAS as well. Once we were able to identify where the pollutants were coming from, it was very easy. Point source control works quite well. So I think the numerous benefits of biosolids, you don't want to put that stuff in a landfill. You're creating better soil health. You're offsetting the amount of fertilizers that farmers have to use. It's overwhelmingly good for the environment.
We've got a few questions here in the chat that I want to make sure we cover as well. Appreciate Jeff, they were asking if there are other sources of pollution. I know Kathy mentioned landfills, but are there other ones that you know of?
Yeah, landfill leachate is often a big source of PFAS, but in most cases, I think most landfills reuse that leachate for dust control on site. So it's kind of a cyclical thing on site, that location. We have seen it done a lot of, where we noticed the most PFAS being used in our community was in metal plating industries. They use it for a wetting agent to help coating of products when they're being plated, but also for to keep evaporation down in the tanks as well. And so we have seen it in many of those. We have seen it, oddly enough, it's in fertilizers and it's in pesticides. And so they use it for wetting agents so that the pesticides can actually penetrate the insects and not roll off the leaves. You know, a lot of leaves have a waxy type substance on them. And so a lot of your farm pesticides or fertilizers roll right off of the leaf. And so it's added as a wetting agent to allow it to stick to the leaves as well. So it's been used for decades all around us, but I think it's being managed more effectively now. Unless your community was a place where there was manufacturing those type of compounds, I think those are the ones we really have to do better point source control on and clean up.
Thank you. The questions are starting to come in kind of fast and furious, so I'm going to try to catch up on a couple of them. There was a question on where does the backwash from ion exchange go and what are the levels?
So most of the ion exchange resins that are available are uniform particle size. So you really don't, it's not like GAC where you've got a gradation in particle size. And so really there's no reason to backwash it when you start up. And once you start treatment, we do not recommend backwash once you've established that mass transfer zone, or you will mix up your resin bed and get premature leakage. So there is literally no wet waste. There's no liquid waste stream that comes from ion exchange. And
So-
Cassie, I think you.
So you would replace the treatment unit every time it hits capacity, correct?
That is correct. And just to give you a feel, I mean, it'll generally last, you know, you always have it in a lead lag. And generally speaking, a lead bed will last anywhere between 6 months and a year, depending on that water quality.
But Kathy, while there's not a backwash, typically when you load the resin in an, at an Arizona site, there'd be a forward flush though, correct? That you'd want to perform?
You would have a forward flush. A lot of people have, either a sewer connection or a connection to, a wash or something like that, because a forward flush would not have any PFAS in it. So there wouldn't be any discharge permit. It's just a matter of volume that a person would have to control that volume. And so, good point.
And good question, Jim. At least I'm assuming that was you, Jim. And I'm just going to read this straight from the chat. It says, Jeff, there was attenuation in the PFAS compounds, but the levels listed in the report are still high in relation to proposed drinking water standards. Is that a concern to what the actual standards could be for biosolids/soil?
No, it wasn't a concern. It's going to be higher because it tends to concentrate in the solids in the treatment process. And so they were in parts per billion levels, but important to note, we looked at PFAS levels in virgin soils that have only had the ag only, but no biosolids applications. And they were typically in around the 2 parts per billion. So that's PFAS from just either ambient in the soil or from all the pesticides and herbicides that have been used in crop management. In our sites that have received biosolids for over 20 years, high loading, I think it went up to 4 parts per billion. So, that's when you're looking at parts per trillion level, that's a huge leap, but it's very minimal. I think the PFAS in most of our blood's probably around that same level as well, and we're not ingesting biosolids. Those concentrations, they're largely attenuated, I'd say over 50% by the first 3 feet. And like I mentioned, 95% by the first 6 feet. And so they're below background mediation levels for soil. I think it's good to know that it is sequestered and it's not migrating. If it was migrating beyond that, we have some real concerns. There's a lot of remediation issues. There's one more up here. What is the uptake in crops for land application? Predominantly the crops that we apply to are cotton crops. And so there's no human ingestion or animal ingestion. So we weren't that concerned with it, but there is work being done out of Purdue, Linda Lee's group, and in Michigan also, where they have a lot of wheat crops and food crops. They're doing some plant uptake analysis, and I'll be happy to share some of those research articles out there. We've got a few of them, probably about 4 over the last 5 years that have looked at crop uptake.
Well, I know there's always that question, getting into the food chain, where are we stopping it?
Yep.
So I've always wondered, where does the resin go? I mean, it's been used. Does it go with my missing socks from the washer, or where does it go?
That's a good question. It's interesting. So the EPA has they're doing a lot of studying on incineration. Incineration has been most water treaters' first choice because you can theoretically get rid of the forever chemical. An incineration facility needs to have the right temperature. It has to be over 1100 C, and it has to have the right residence time in the kiln, and the effluent of that kiln, you need to treat it with a scrubber to make sure that you're capturing all of the PFAS. The EPA has actually asked people right now, while they're doing these studies, to hold on to waste. That's nobody's first choice. They've talked about deep well injection for some of this waste. Again, not a great choice. Their next option is landfill, the first of those being a closed loop landfill. And a closed loop landfill is essentially a hazardous waste site where it's lined and all the leachate is captured and, as Jeff said, put back into the site. So incineration and landfill are the two options right now. There are other solutions that are being studied, things like supercritical water oxidation. I think as these things are studied better, that there will be more options in the future.
Heather, one comment I'd like
Kelsey,
to
did
share
you
with
have anything? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, one
Go ahead,
comment I'd
Jeff.
like to share with people, it's kind of interesting that's coming out of our research, especially with Purdue and Temple University, is when they look at the PFAS partitioning, a wastewater treatment facility, essentially, it's a biological process, right? We don't add a lot of chemicals other than for disinfection. It's a biological process. And even though we consider these compounds forever chemicals, they do transform and get degraded just in the wastewater treatment process, and it's happening in the soil we see as well. So some of the work that we've worked on with Temple University, they'll look at primary sludge. So that's all the PFAS that's precipitated out at the very first treatment stage in a treatment plant, and you'll see the 16 PFAS compounds. You look at that same snapshot post anaerobic digestion, that's 20 days in a digester at 95 degrees. You'll see different PFAS compounds. So some of those smaller chains or larger chains, they're transforming in the process. When we look at the PFAS in soils at the ag plots, we've been applying for 20 years, we see PFAS and PFOA, but a lot of the smaller chains, we see different ones that we don't see. And so was there a different type of product that was applied 10 or 15 years ago? Or microbial action, are these being broken down in the soils as well? So that's really interesting stuff that we're doing. And that's the EPA ultimate fate transport and risk assessment that we just started last month. That'll be a 2-year project, but really very interesting. We'd like to think of these as forever chemicals, but when they're under a microbial action, they do transform.
Great. And then I guess the comment I wanted to make, so with the resin, I think Kathy spoke very well to what happens to it after it's been removed from your treatment site and it's contaminated with the PFAS compounds. On the carbon side or a GAC side, typically you send it to what's known as a reactivation facility. So it basically works kind of the same sense as an incineration facility in that you're setting it to giant kilns that are in a sense baking off the PFAS compounds. And like Kathy said, there's certain reactivation facilities that will take the PFAS contaminated carbon because it depends on what temperatures that reactivation facility runs at and making sure it is a high enough temperature to remove those PFAS compounds. But instead of incinerating the whole product, what they're doing is they're taking when they remove the PFAS compounds from the GAC particles, they're actually repurposing that carbon into what's known as a reactivated product. So the baked off PFAS compounds go to a scrubber, just like the incineration facility, but then the product, when the PFAS is removed, is then reformed back into a granular activated particle. And typically that is sold off in industrial applications, chemical plants, refineries that use the reactivated product. There is some questions on if the EPA is going to classify the spent media as hazardous. Right now, it's known as, it is non-hazardous. And as far as what that changes for the media, it just means that it's going to be sent to a different facility that is permitted for hazardous waste versus non-hazardous waste. So there are hazardous permitted reactivation facilities that are typically used for industrial applications. All the contaminants we treat for in drinking water are non-hazardous in most cases. So if it does get classified as hazardous, there are reactivation facilities of which the spent carbon can go to. And speaking for the resin, it's same thing. There are facilities of which it can go to. It just means that you got to go to specific facilities that have been permitted for hazardous waste.
So that might be something to think about then for future costs.
Yes.
Is additional transport. Or
Yeah,
something like that.
could play a factor. Yes.
Now, are y'all finding that for disposal, you're having to cross state lines? Like not every state has these facilities?
Yes, definitely. I would say in most cases. For Arizona, a reactivation facility, they've got a few actually there and one in Parker. I know Evoqua and Calgon both have a reactivation facility in Arizona. But if it becomes hazardous, that could change for Calgon, definitely. For Evoqua, that might not be the case, but I'm not sure what afterburner temperature they run at. But it could change the location. Incineration facilities, Kathy, I think Utah is the closest for Arizona.
Yeah, I think it's Ohio. There's most of the incineration facilities that'll take it are more in the east. Most of the landfill facilities that'll take it are in the west.
So it could be a lot. It could be a distance.
And, you know, I think Kelsey mentioned about PFAS becoming hazardous, and I see Darren had a question on it. It is in the EPA's plan to classify PFAS as a hazardous waste. There is a bill. It's gone, I believe, through the House. It hasn't gone through the Senate yet. I think there is a movement within that to try and exempt liability, and that's the big word, to exempt utilities from the liability of PFAS from a hazardous waste generator. But yes, it probably will be called hazardous, a hazardous substance within the next, I would say, 2 years.
And Jeff, are you seeing that with any of the solids? Like, how are you actually able to treat the solids? Or do you have to send them offsite or?
No, so we're talking biosolids. We don't do any PFAS treatment. And so just through the biological process, but I think the concentration limits that will be permitted, they'll deem it hazardous, I think will be well below that. Most municipalities will, unless you have an industrial manufacturing source, then you may have some difficulty. And that's going to be tough for those areas. What are they going to do with their biosolids? Are they going to have to incinerate it? You know, because they probably won't take it to a landfill and they can't land apply it. So that's the importance of having good point source control in your community.
I know a lot of operators are like, oh, with all this new stuff, I'm just going to retire. That way I don't have to deal with it. And I'm like, well, then who's going to be watching your water source for you? You know, your wastewater sources, if you're not there. Any advice for those who are looking at this mountain to overcome?
I think we've all been there. So
I think everyone's in the same boat. Unfortunately, it is spread across the nation. It's not very localized. So I think as much as we can learn from each other, the better, the more information we have. So I'd say, you know, try to learn as much as you can from your neighbors and even cross state lines. The Northeast has moved forward with treatment for the last couple of years and have already put in place MCLs. So they've been forced to move forward with treatment. And I know Arizona's looking at it. California's moved forward with some preliminary, what they call response levels. And so a lot of people are already pushing forward. And I think there's a lot to learn from one another. And there's going to be new technologies that hopefully develop and lower operational costs that we can learn from each other as well. So that's my advice.
well said.
Yeah, and I think it's all manageable. It's you know, honestly, whether you're running a GAC plant or an ion exchange plant, you get the equipment in. Once it's running for 6, 10, 12 months at a time. You do a change out, you know, once a year. It's not that hard, really. Yes, it's more sampling. It's more money for the sampling. But it is manageable.
Jeff, do you have something to share?
I think I've talked enough.
No, this has really been really good. I'm like sitting there making mental notes myself. Oh, you know, look into that, read that. Let's see. I don't want to miss any potential chat questions real quick, but I think we've covered them all. And Jeff, you did send your link as well. Great. Well, really want to thank everyone for joining us, for taking your time in to just kind of step in and talk with us about all of this. A lot to learn still coming, and just really appreciate your guys' time today. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, both Heather and the group that put this together. I did put my contact information in the chat, and encourage Kelsey and Jeff to do that. And yeah.
Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. And yes, thank you guys for putting this on. I think it was a great idea.
Yeah. All right, and with that, we will close and turn back over to Don.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you once again to all the panelists. We do appreciate your time and effort. So this is the point in our day where we've made it through 2 hours of our panel so far. We're going to take a 30-minute break to go ahead and give you a chance to get some lunch in, take a break, and also get caught up if you're at your existing facility right now. Please come back at about 12:30. A little bit after. We're going to have a fun game here. Jim will be our Alex Trebek hosting our Jeopardy game. So please come ready to answer some trivia. We do have some prizes. So I'm going to stop recording for this lunch break. And once again, we'll see you all back here in about 30 minutes. Thank you. I'm going to turn the, so we are recording again. So the people are coming in now.
Sounds good.
So. So you should be able to share now.
Can you see it?
Not yet. No.
Oh, I know why. I didn't hit the share button.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to try and do is highlight everybody who's on the thing so I know how to fill you in. W. White, William Epcor, okay. Mike Davis. He's a panelist, but we'll let him play.
Should be open to all.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna start answering questions so I get all the gift cards. Not me.
Okay, everybody, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes here to let everybody return back in. Unfortunately, we do not have sound effects to play the Jeopardy theme.
Just let me know whenever you want me to start, Don.
We'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes and then probably, yeah, we got. Give it just 1 more minute. So let's start at 12:35 and we'll kick start it again. So. Okay, everybody. Well, we'll go ahead and kick start this again. As people join on, I'll try and put it forward. We do appreciate once again your time in this training. Hopefully, you're getting a lot of good information out of it. As a just to remind everybody, some housekeeping. Please keep yourself. Well, actually, we'll be able to unmute yourself here during this game, but we are being recorded, and we're going to have a little post-lunch game here with from Jim and with some prizes. So hopefully they're not too hard. So Jim, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, I'm going to kick it right back to you. You can pick the first category and question.
For me, let's go very simple here to start it off, get everybody off their lunch break. Let's go math for 100 then. Oh, wait, we got to tell people how it works, right? So,
Yes. So if you know the answer, raise your hand,
yeah.
and then Don will call on you. And then you answer. And then he will keep track of the points that way.
Yep.
Any questions? All right, let's go.
Who was that? That we got. Ooh, I gotta see how this thing.
Darren?
Yeah, Darren.
You can unmute yourself and then give us the answer or the question.
Oh, yeah, it was the weight of water.
Good answer. So now you get to pick the next category.
Let's go math for 200.
Don't
Go
forget
on
to
down
lower
there.
your hand.
We got Darren again.
The area of an object.
Very good. Your turn still.
It's got the board.
Potluck for 100.
And just keep in mind that whenever I was doing this, we were doing operator certifications. Anybody?
Ex Salas.
Failing.
So it's anxiety. And what I was looking it up and testing, besides public speaking, testing, I think, is number 2. So as I would do my classes, you know, the anxiety is a natural human feeling, but it could also help you by making you more alert and ready to take the test. And what I used to tell people is, don't cram the night before. If you don't know it the day before, the night of cramming is probably not going to help you. It only increases your anxiety and interferes with your clear thinking. So, good answer. You get to pick the next category.
Laboratory for 500.
Ooh,
Oh,
I
big.
like the way he plays.
I need to have a clock.
Yeah, I know.
And are we answering in a form of a question too?
Yeah, I'm pretty lax on that. I'm not as bad as Alex. Anybody? Going once? Going twice? So again, pH is a measure of acids and alkalinity. BOD, the amount of oxygen required for aerobic microorganisms to decompose organic matter. Suspended solids, small solids, particles that remain in suspension in the water. Dissolved solids, we all know what those are: calcium, magnesium, sodium. And then total solids, the total content of suspended and dissolved solids in the water. And Salas, you get to pick again. I got 500 points for that.
Laboratory for 100.
All right.
We're gonna have to, is there a little bit more context to this right now? What is define Mike? Okay, Mike was up first. Mike Davis.
Sample is just a snapshot sample of what you're analyzing.
What represents a single instance in time. So yes, you are absolutely correct. And you get to pick our next topic.
Anaerobic digestion for 100. What's this water from? What, condensation trap, or what is a condensation trap? What are you?
Who answered?
That was Mike
That's
Davis.
I'm sorry. I need to play by the rules and.
Oh, that's okay. You're doing good. What is a drip trap?
Yeah.
Condensation trap, drip trap. Good answer.
That
All
works?
right. Huh?
Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Condensation trap, that's, it all depends on what part of the country you live in. There's all sorts of names.
Yep.
Next,
Activated sludge for 100.
and you only have to do one. I'll give it to you. You only have to do one of those.
Darren,
RAS is return activated sludge.
Good answer. And again, whenever I first set this up, it was for training. So I was trying to get across a lot of different points. So that's why there's so many different answers. But you're exactly right. So what is our next topic?
Go activated sludge for 200.
Oh, I think I hit the wrong one. My bad. Anybody want to go on this one?
Mike Davis,
Talk about methane and carbon dioxide.
Do you want to guess another one for the bonus?
Hydrogens, H2S, hydrogen sulfide.
Look at that. He gets double the points.
nice. What was that? You said that was for 200?
That was for 200.
Plus he got the extra points, right?
Yep. So I got a total of 400 points on that one. Good job.
Okay.
And then we're going to go back to activated sludge
Oh, okay.
because I clicked the wrong button because, you know.
Gotcha.
And you only have to define one of them.
Mike,
I don't know about define, but we use denitrification to reduce our nitrates and nitrification to reduce our ammonia.
And he is correct.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Summarize.
so just to get an update, everybody, Xavier has got 100 points or $100. Mike Davis is at 800 and Darren's at 400. So
And
plenty.
whoever just answered, what topic would you like to do next?
that was Mike.
Pump and pumps for 100.
Some
And we don't subtract points if you're wrong.
Mike Davis again.
I don't know, centrifugal pump.
What is a centrifugal pump? Good answer. Next,
Pumps and pumps.
200.
Yes, sir. Oh my goodness.
I think I know that one, but I don't think I can put Darren. Darren, raise his hand.
And is it like 25 feet?
Do you want to call a lifeline?
No.
That's like 21.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It is 25 feet. I was just checking, just make sure we feel confident about our answers. Good job. What topic do we want to go to next, Darren?
Can I get math for 300?
I tell my staff they need to learn, live, and love this formula because you use it all the time. Anybody? Going once? Going twice? What's the formula for loading or in pounds per day? Since I know that one, let me pick the next topic. Oh, let's go potluck. I forget what this one is. And
Darren,
What is fecal coliform?
Good answer.
how much was that one for?
200.
Okay.
Do potluck for 300.
Oh, sorry. I duplicated, my bad. We're gonna kick you down to 400.
Now, Mike. Mike Davis.
Ferric chloride.
It's one of them. I'll take that answer. But it's also ferrous chloride, ferrous sulfite, and aluminum sulfate.
All right. Yeah, we use ferrous, but we've been discussing because we got a phosphorus problem that we're going to start using ferric chloride.
I like aluminum sulfate because you don't stain everything red. And it works really well. Just my opinion. All right. What's our next topic?
Activated sludge for 300.
Mike.
Class A and Class B.
Class A and Class B. Good job. What's next?
Laboratory for 200.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Mike Davis. I wasn't paying. I'm sorry. I was looking at the scoreboard. Mike.
And let's go balance.
Good answer. Where are we going next?
That's a good thing, Mike. Yeah.
Activated sludge for 300.
You only have to describe one of them.
Mike, did you raise your hand again, or did you that just left over?
I think it was left over. Is my
Okay.
hand down now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's see. Complete mix. So the complete mix is when you have your mixed liquor or your bioreactor and your all zones are completely mixed. You're feeding, like for us, we feed one zone, it carries over to the next zone, but it's completely mixed as one homogeneous product.
Jim, you're the judge as well. So I will give him credit on that one.
Partial credit, maybe. I don't know if I got it all.
And again, you know, some of the questions are a little longer, but it was used, and I would spend 30 or 40 minutes just talking about the 5 different types of activated sludge. But good answer. Let's move on to the next one.
Pumps and pumping for 300.
Darren.
What is a positive displacement pump?
You got it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
you got it.
That's
I was
it.
even looking at the wrong thing.
No, I
Same
was just
category.
giving, and again, there's some examples of different types of positive displacement pumps.
Yeah.
Okay. Update, Mike Davis has a commanding lead at 2,100. Darren's at 1,100. And is Xavier or Javier? I'm not sure. But yeah, you're still in it, bud. So now we get the big dollar ones. So
Darren, you still got your hand up, but you get to pick the next category.
Same category, please. Thank you.
Pumps and pumping.
Darren.
What is
I
an
haven't
airlift pump?
That is exactly the right answer.
That's
You
cheating
have
because
those.
he's got some on there. I know he's got
I hate those.
You know, there's no such thing as cheating in this game.
Oh.
500.
You only have to let's see. Oh, no, you have to look at,
Pump selection here.
yep. I'm not seeing any hands.
Oh,
And again, this isn't a really fair question to anybody because all of them are different. But it pretty much would explain to them whenever they were taking their test, which pumps are used for which process. So, oh, hang on.
uh-oh.
Yeah, we
Lost
should
the game board.
We lost the game board, but we're gonna get it right back again. In theory.
Give us a sec.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. I think we're gonna go for potluck for 500. So you can name any flow meter and tell me its use, and you can be a winner. Oh, we got two
Ooh.
hands.
I'll be honest with you, they saw them both go up at the same time.
All right. Well, I tell you what, if you both can answer this question, then you both get points. So Darren, you can go first.
A magnetic meter measures full pipe flow.
Okay. Mike?
I was gonna say a partial flume normally measures wastewater flow, influent flow generally.
I'll go along with those.
Yeah, there's a flume. Yep.
Yeah, they're all different types of flow meters, and as we all know, the different applications for different flow meters. Good job. Ooh, hello. All right, why don't you two go ahead and pick the next topic?
Activated sludge for 400.
Activated sludge for 400. I almost did that anaerobic digestion again because I love anaerobic digestion. So name me a cause of sludge bulking. Pick any one that you want. I can tell you there's up to at least 6 of them that I found.
Cause of sludge bulking. So in the past, we've had bulking because that's nitrification.
Darren. Crazy.
The return is not fast enough.
That's not the direction I was really looking for.
Got it.
So we're going to flub up some answers. Low DO, low organic loading rate, septic waste and sulfides, which are normal up here in Flagstaff, nutrient deficiency, low pH, high grease and oil. And again, the different types of filamentous bacteria that pop up with those. Since nobody really likes the laboratory, let's go there. You can pick one and tell me what the preservative action is required.
Mike Davis.
Metals is nitric, I believe.
Nitric acid, very good. Pick our next topic because we're running out of time.
Okay. Anaerobic digestion for 400.
Mike Davis.
We use mesophilic bacteria and thermophilic. Mesophilic is normally generally not, I was gonna say,
You were good.
okay.
I'll take those answers. What's our next topic there, Mike?
Anaerobic digestion for 500. Four steps.
What's that noise it makes? Oh, there's Mike Davis.
I don't know if I can get it or not, but you got your digestion of your fatty acids by your acid bacteria, and then your methane fermenters, and then it converts into the gas, methane gas. So the breakdown of your volatile fatty acids by your various bacteria, your methane or your acid formers and methane fermenters, and then digestion of that process of that. I probably can't get all the steps.
That's okay. Let's pop it up. So you were along the right path, right? So there's hydrolysis, acidogenous, acetogenous, and then methogenous. So, and again, generally we talk about, the acid formers doing their job and then the methane formers doing their job. But again, this was for training purposes and never know what's going to be on the test. So I took them through all of it.
Right.
So
with the proper names.
with the proper names, but that's okay. Unless I get to read them, I don't remember the proper names either. So you're all good. All right. I think we got time for one more and then I got to stop.
Laboratory for 400.
And it's a bonus question.
And it's a bonus question.
Mike Davis.
I don't know, peer review.
What is quality control?
Oh, yeah.
QA, QC, right? It's all right.
Peer review is a form of QA, QC, but yes.
There you go.
No.
And again, you have to remember that we were talking about the lab. Lab
Yeah.
is always QA, QC, right?
Yeah.
So just for fun, organisms with the activated sludge process,
Oh, yeah.
some math, blah, blah, blah. This was also a bonus question. So it's pi. And everybody on Monday was talking, all my engineer friends were talking about pi on Monday because it was 314. So that was fun. And then, pi is used for the radius. And if you know the diameter, you can use 0.785. And then the last one was actually a math question from that formula that we used before.
Some of you all read a lot faster than I do.
Yeah, me too.
Those questions, like some of you had some answers up. So I do have some results here. The winner would be Mike Davis, I believe at 3,500 or 3,500, right? That's right. Then Darren at 2,000, and then Javier, I believe it's Javier. I'm sorry if I'm not mispronouncing your name, but at 100. So is Andrea, are you back? I see you on there.
I am.
Did we confirm the prizes? I believe we did get some gift cards, correct?
We will have to order some gift cards. So
Yes, so we do have some gift cards for our participants that we'll be coordinating with and getting you out. So, thank you for playing.
Thank you all for playing.
Thank you, Jim, for putting that together and having that as availability. So let me move this over here now. So do we want to take a break? I do see Jason's on board, Jim's here as well, and Mike Davis actually is on the panel with us for our last panel of the day.
I would like to take a break, and Steve is here with me.
Okay, Steve's there with you? Okay, good.
Correct.
Well, let's just take a quick 10-minute break to give people a little bit chance to get caught in, and we will see you back in about 10 minutes here, and then we will conclude with our last panel of the day. The panel is going to consist of operator retention and training as well too. So Thank you. We'll see you back here in about 10 minutes, about 10 after the hour. So we're going to record. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the last session for the day. Thank you for everybody who's made it this far. Hopefully we put together a good a good round of information to help you out in your field as well too. I'm going to be the moderator for our last final session, which will be operator retention. And I'll go ahead and I'll let each of the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. So Mike, why don't you kick it off? So.
Good afternoon. My name's Mike Davis. Work with the city of Mesa. I've been in the wastewater treatment industry for 32 years. Been with Mesa for 19 of those years. Came all the way up as an operator, then supervisor, now superintendent. And I just been in the field for a while. Got in by accident. Funny story, but I won't bore you guys with that. I got into it in the military, in the Air Force, and it's paid the bills ever since.
It is good.
I like Mike, started my career in the Air Force.
Turd herder.
Turd herders, that's what we were. So my name is Jim Yuko. I am the water reclamation manager for the city of Flagstaff. I've been doing this for about 38 years. And I have a passion for wastewater, I guess, which is kind of weird to hear, but
It's
kind of
true.
fun.
I'm Steve Kemp. I'm the regulatory compliance manager for City of Flagstaff, and spent 30 years. I actually spent an awful lot of time at ADEQ in water and wastewater. I was actually born in Mesa, but lived up here for 25 years.
And Jason?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jason Cheshire. I'm the operations supervisor for the city of Surprise. I'm in charge of our wastewater treatment facilities. I've only been in this industry for about 10 years now, but I too started as an intern, worked my way up. I'm also ex-military, but I did not do this in the military. Same thing as Mike. I have an interesting story about how I started in this industry. But yeah, I have no experience in the military as far as this goes. Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and kick it off once again to everybody here. If you do have some questions, please put it down in the chat and we'll talk further. This one will be a little bit different than the other presentations, as it's more of just a straight panel where we're going to ask questions. As everybody understands, in this current market, not just in the wastewater operations facilities across the board, labor and retaining people is become extremely challenging across all industries. And then being a plant operator obviously definitely increases that more because of the required training you need to have in order to be classified to actually run some plants and help out on a day-to-day basis. So I want to kick off, Mike. What are some of the challenges you're currently seeing trying to find and recruit new operators?
For us, we see that there seems to be a limited pool of qualified operators. And in Mesa, we go months without seeing a qualified applicant for Operator 2 position. Operator 2 requires a grade 3 wastewater certification. And we'll get applicants, that don't have quite the certification. Then there's nothing, there's just silence. And so what we're trying to do is build our own, because I have a number of staff retiring in the next year or two, and we're not replenishing our staff at the rate they're leaving. So it's kind of terrifying, if you ask me, because these plants have to run still, So we're just seeing a limited pool of qualified operators, and hopefully as time goes, people are getting their they're grade ones and they're waiting their time frame and they're able to get their grade twos. And maybe someday we'll have be like the old days where there was a nice wide selection or variety of operators to choose from.
Jim, Steve, same question to you. Obviously, you have the additional challenge of being, Arizona or Phoenix, Mesa, and Surprise are closer to the metropolitan area. So I would think you have some additional challenges being a little bit more remote, right?
We do. And so I've been up in Flagstaff for about 6 years. But I came from Illinois, but we have the same issue. Trying to find qualified applicants is difficult at best. So generally what I've tried to do is switch it around to hire somebody with the attitude and the aptitude for what we do, because to me, it takes special people to do this job, because it's not always a pleasant place to be, right? Whenever things are going bad and you're getting sprayed in the mouth with raw wastewater, nobody really enjoys that. And I see Mike laughing and smiling, because if you've been in this long enough, we've all drank a little bit of wastewater in our time. But so, and since I've been here, I've hired probably about 10 people. And out of all of those, only one of them actually had a certification. So it makes it really challenging. So we've kind of, and we're following the same motto as Mike is, we got to grow from within. But the problem is, if the town that you work for doesn't pay, and I know I've heard about down in the valley, operators are moving around from town to town because this town will pay me $1 more. And then 2 years later, I go back to the town that I just came from because now they're going to pay me $1 more. That makes it challenging. And Steve, I'll let you go.
Yeah, and we had a program that did grow our own, and then the HR took that program away from us, and it was a real successful program at growing our own. It's not just here too, because when I was at the ADQ, we dealt with a lot of little systems out there, grade 1, grade 2 systems that had a heck of a time finding operators too, just to operate their remote as a remote operator. And so it's not just bigger plants, it's little systems too that have a hard time.
Well, I think it's the industry as a whole, because who wants to work at a wastewater plant? I mean, whenever you go, people go, what do you do for work? Oh, I run a treatment plant. They're like, ew. So that's part of that challenge.
And then Jason, Mesa's a growing city, all your growing cities in that sense, but Surprise tends to have a lot more, there's a little bit more Wild West out there. What are you seeing, or what do you think?
So we've had a hard time finding those that are really interested in our field. It seems like lately we've been getting a lot of, if we do find interest, it seems like it's more on the water side. Me being a wastewater operator, I feel, we do quite a bit more than the water department does, whether that's true or not. But, I feel it takes a lot of expertise to be a wastewater operator. And so when you factor all that in for basically the same pay, we find some that just go ahead and transfer over to water. In the last 2 years, we've hired 2 people that as operator ones who had water background. And it ended up not working out because eventually when a position became available here in the city, they went ahead and went right back over to the water department. So really, finding those that are, young and interested in this field has been a challenge. And then of course, money. When we find those that are interested and do want to work for the city, we can't give them anywhere near what they want. A lot of them, some of the feedback we've gotten, it's, we post the position and we post the position with a hiring range. And so they come on thinking that they can get, mid or somewhere in the higher end of that hiring range. And we just can't do that. So really money has been a challenge as well.
I'll open up this question to the entire panel, but are there any unique strategies you're trying to implement within your own area to try and, overcome some of these challenges, you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, so we have one great thing going for us is that we have basically a partnership with Gateway Community College. We call it Surprise Gateway Training Center. And basically it's an internship program that we work with in collaboration with Gateway. And basically we hire 3 interns a year and hope and try to, bring them up that way. And again, in that, doing that, we used to get at least 1 applicant out of the 3 that we'd end up hiring. And now this last time, again, it was they were interested in water, and none of the 3 applicants or 3 interns were interested in wastewater. They wanted to go to the water side. So it's been tough there. With that though, forgot my train of thought.
It's all right. I can help you out a little bit. So I agree with what Jason's been saying. It's been my experience that water operators stay in water. Wastewater operators can start in wastewater and move over to water and come back. But wastewater workers are kind of special, right? Because of the fact that I mentioned before of, you're getting sprayed with wastewater or sludge or whatever the case may be. You have to deal with all the smells. So it makes it really challenging. And as Steve alluded to, we used to have an MSW program, which worked really well because we could set the tone for what we wanted them to learn through each skill block. And each time they completed one, they would get a raise. So we've switched over to a different program that they still go through blocks, but now it's just based on their license. And in my opinion, the license is a wonderful thing to have, but you could have the highest license because you're book smart and never really understand how to run a treatment plant. So the license to me is as important as the training, whether you're in operations and maintenance. And for my group, whenever I first got here, we had 2 different groups. We had operations on one side and maintenance on the other side, and never should the path cross. And I said, we don't have enough people for that. So I started combining both operations and maintenance into one group because I don't know what I'm going to need on any particular day. I might need more operators on one day. I might need more maintenance people on one day. So what I've been trying to do is use some of the online trainings and then what I do as part of their evaluations is I tell them that they have to complete certain courses during the next evaluation period so that they can start to increase their skills. But again, it's just sharing back and forth so that they have a better understanding. And we're also trying to do that through SCADA too. So our SCADA team, because again, Flagstaff has a small limited amount of people, we're sharing them in all different directions so that we can handle pretty much any problem that comes along. Do you have anything to say, Steve?
No, I know that, the lab, when they created the lab, we had operator requirements in there and I had to take those out because you just can't find any applicants putting in for a lab with certification. But the MSW program was real successful. Mm-hmm. I thought we raised an awful lot of good operators out of that. And the pay got to be the point to where they actually were sticking around.
Yeah.
But they've taken that away from us now.
And that's the other challenge that we have too, is we don't pay. They can go down to, we had a gentleman that worked here. He was working in water department.
Yeah, drinking water.
And he went down to Scottsdale and joined their SCADA team. And he was making more money as somebody coming in. And again, Scottsdale has more money than probably all of us combined. So they can pull away those really good operators and that really good staff, and you don't have any choice, and it makes it challenging.
Yeah, we recently, me and my manager, Reynaldo Odavo, we came together and we're trying to start basically a trainee position where it's currently with HR, and I think it's going to eventually go through. But we had, we're trying to walk that fine line where we're finding people that we're trying to get a bigger applicant pool, but at the same time, not necessarily get people that, can come into the position less qualified. So we're trying to kind of make it so where if we have an operator 1 position open, then they can apply for this trainee position. And as long as this trainee position is filled, we cannot fill the operator 1 position with the intent that when they, get their certifications and and meet the qualifications to become an operator one, there is that position for them. And we're really just doing it because the app, like you guys said earlier, the pool of applicants is so small that we're trying to find a way to make that bigger. But it's been tough going.
Yeah, in Mesa, I worked with our HR group and my supervisor, and we changed the certification requirements for our interns and operator ones. We dropped them down because I saw other cities dropping their certifications down, and I didn't want Mesa to be a training ground for everybody that just comes here and goes someplace else.
Right.
So we dropped our certifications down for interns now don't require certification.
Yep.
And operator one
We tried to
requires
do this.
a grade one. And it's new into the process, but we're seeing more selection. Another thing we did too, we had a number of our staff leave for the private sector. You got your Intels and companies like that just rob it. They just, who, if they want, they get.
Yeah.
And we had, 4 or 5 operators just go over there. Of course, we can't compete with, the private sector like that. But we did make some adjustments to our since we were getting a lot of our applicants from our intern program, they were starting off at the bottom scale. But flash forward 2 or 3 years later, they're pretty solid operators, and they're only making a certain amount of money. And then here comes another city or offering, $6 an hour more. So we made a change to bump all our any operator that was below midpoint up to midpoint, and that at least trying to stop the bleeding, get them just to stop looking.
Well, and HR is all about midpoint. I mean, I was just trying to promote one of my staff to become a supervisor, and they offered him an extra $1. And I'm like, for the responsibility that they have,
Right.
how do you do that? And they're like, well, that's all we can do, because if we give them any more, then that's not fair to the other people. And that's been the biggest change that I've seen recently in HR. Well, we want to get everybody to midpoint. And I'm like, well, if I'm an employee, I don't want to be at midpoint. I want to be at the top of that scale.
Right.
I want to be making as much money as I possibly can, because that goes into my retirement, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And well, we're going to compare you guys. And at one point before we made the change, they were comparing a rec supervisor who runs a swimming pool to a wastewater supervisor who's running a treatment plant. And their logic was, we both use chemicals.
Yes. See, there's a disconnect between all of us that run the plants and the HR, the higher ups. They don't understand. I don't think they understand what we do. Right?
No.
Because they make decisions like that. Like, say, case in point, you mentioned swimming pool. One of our maintenance guys was going to leave to go be a swimming pool mechanic because they made more than the wastewater plant mechanic. I was like, how's it even possible?
Is that job still open? I might change.
It's such a battle, because we're battling not only trying to find qualified operators, but we're battling the politics of our cities, and it's a tough position.
Well,
Because like
people
we
don't
said,
realize
the sewage doesn't stop coming in. It still comes in no matter what.
Yeah.
and we're not like the water plants that can, like up here in Flagstaff, their surface water plant shuts off at night.
Yeah.
We never get to shut off.
Mhm.
We're 24/7, 365. It doesn't matter if it's, your daughter's wedding. If things go bad, you might end up having to go to work. Right. And I think we've all been there. and it's part of the challenge, because I don't think the work ethic is there with the younger people, because they feel entitled.
It would be full of
Right.
swimming pool with
That's
sewage
so
and
true.
bottled
It's so
water.
true.
Well, that would lead into my next question I would have for the panel here. Obviously, there's a change in generational. I will admit, I'm now old enough where I'm like, there's some young kids nowadays. We have a new hire that was born this century, so it's like, oh wow.
Does that make you feel old?
Yeah, just a little bit. We just like Mike said, the best thing, the water keeps coming. We got to keep treating it, right? Or you have to keep treating it. There's a gap obvious there between the older and the retiring out. what are some of the tools you're using to try and bridge that gap between your older and your more newer? Is there any tips or anything you can have in terms of that? I'm not saying anyone has it figured out, but what are some of the things you think that could help bridge that gap between the two generations, or the generational change?
I think it goes back to the hiring process, hiring people that have the attitude and the aptitude to do this job. Because most of my staff have less than 5 years of experience, and they are outstanding, and they're going to be good for years to come. But we've also had some that came in that didn't quite make the cut, and they had to go.
Yep.
And I think it starts with the people that you hire to start with, because not all millennials are, the stereotypical ones. People are individuals, and you just have to look for them and be willing to open it up to people who have no experience. I hired a young lady who was working at Denny's. She's now one of my best employees. I hired one guy who came out of NAU. He had a whole chapter on wastewater that he told us during his interview, which was hilarious. And he goes, "I'm well qualified. I've had a whole chapter on wastewater." And we still joke with him now 6 years later, but he's been an excellent addition to our team. And so you have to have an open mind whenever you're looking at the resumes and the job applications to hire the people that you think might fit.
Yeah. You have to be careful too, not to get desperate and hire anybody. If you let anybody into these plants, it's hard to get them out. And, then you're stuck with that employee that just doesn't get it, or is not serious about wastewater.
Right.
Get you some violations and a whole lot of headaches. I used to have a lot of hair, and now it's all.
Yeah, me too. But Steve has a comment.
It's always been a question, you always talk about the younger generation not meeting the expectations of the older, but that's nothing new though.
Yeah, they said the same thing about us whenever we were coming up. You guys are useless.
But to capture that knowledge, what Mason's been doing is trying to, if we're able to, we try to pair up our new hires with some of these older operators to get that transference of knowledge from them, and it works pretty good. Also, we try to put SOPs in place and get that knowledge, from the older operators on paper somehow, some way that because once they retire and are gone, that knowledge it's gone. So we try to get it out of their head into.
And I agree with what you're saying, Mike, but there's also problems with some of the older operators know all the shortcuts.
They do.
And they don't really follow the safety rules that they're supposed to be doing. So you have to take that and make sure that it's a good operator that you're sending out, the ones that you trust. It's not just any operator, because we've had some issues where people go, "Well, this is the way that I was trained," and that's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, or you get the older operator, you ask them, "Why are we doing it that way?" "Well, we've always done it that way."
I hate that.
That's the way we always do it.
I hate that answer. It drives me crazy.
Oh, so do I. I had an old fire chief tell me, anytime I hear that, he knew it was time for a change.
Well, I'm sorry, Jason, do you have something?
Oh, yeah, same thing as Mike was saying. We try to basically have some of our younger operators shadow some of the older operators, and go into different wastewater facilities within the city. One of the other treatment plants we have, there's more senior operators there, and so we usually send some of the new guys up there to try and cross train with them. Again, to pick their brain and kind of see how things are done. And we've been actually trying to, with our work order system, making sure that, when the operators close out a work order, that they're being very descriptive in what they're doing, paying particular attention to like history of, if say it's a pump or something like that, that they are PMing, that they will be very descriptive on what they're doing, just so that at least if someone else is coming up, some younger operators coming up, and he can look back at this work order system and see the history of whatever it is he's working on. So I think that's one good way to kind of bridge that. that age gap.
I do have one question for one of our participants, Kirill. He's an ASU professor, and I want to ask what he's been seeing, because he's catching, the young up and comers in the industry. If he's what he's seeing on his end. I don't know if he has a microphone or not, but
I'm here. I've
There
been
he is.
listening to the conversation. Hi, Mike.
how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Thank you guys for all what you're doing. A lot of people, as you mentioned, do not understand how important your job is. And we are trying to find out who is interested in the university arena once they come up to be a sophomore, junior, who is interested in water or wastewater treatment operator. I keep emphasizing that it's a good job, it's a good career, and it pays well. And Mike, I typically use you as an example. Your ears oftentimes may be burning when I'm teaching. I said, hey, you can make 6 figures easy, but it's a lot of responsibility. And what Mike has been doing in before COVID, especially after COVID, we kind of slowed down, hosting our students to actually see the process, because that kind of gets them excited. And we've had several people actually pursuing a career in wastewater treatment as an operator and so on. Many people get it, go to graduate school, but I think there's still an opportunity and room to grow with respect to training. We offer classes. I'm actually teaching the water wastewater class on 300 level. And we just started the water treatment yesterday. And there's a lot of interest. And anything you guys can help us disseminate the information among the students, I think is going to help you guys back, make more students interested in the job. And as I said, Mike has been an amazing instrumental in hosting our students. By the way, Mike, I'm going to probably email you to figure out what the options are for the future for visiting. I'm just abusing the opportunity right now to tell you that.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome.
Well, and we use NAU because they're nice and close to us. We have them come over for tours so that, trying to get that information out there. But the hard part is you have people who go to college and then they get out and they're working in the field and they still don't want to pay them because they don't really have any true experience yet. And then you have the guy who walks in off the street and they're both making the same amount of money. And,
Yes.
and that's somewhat of the challenge for that too. And again, I agree that this is a really critical field for us. And I'm worried a little bit about the future because we just, sometimes we don't see we'll have 3 applicants. For my supervisor job, I had 3 applicants. 2 of them were internal. So what do you do with that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a huge challenge for us moving into the future. And again, if somebody goes to college for 4 years, they don't want to come in at the bottom of that scale.
Right. I agree. It's terrifying. The lack of applicants we see, I'm terrified for the future, because people are going to retire and we have to replace them. I'm doing some crazy stuff now where I'm renting operators.
So
It is crazy, but I had no choice but to I got to staff the plant. So
How much you paying? I might come down to be a rental operator.
a suggestion,
ungodly
if I
price.
may, a suggestion, oftentimes we have students who are getting internship for credit. So maybe what we can do, Mike, with ASU and, Mesa, City of Mesa is, if you have any open positions for internships, even if it's not paid internship, if they can get a credit, that they can, the students can come and do some work. Even if you can pay them pennies would be even better on the dollar compared to what the job is. It will help out and then they get credit. We have a very good internship program and we have students actually looking for internships that will give them credit. It's 400 level or even 500 level graduate students. So that's an opportunity.
We have openings for interns. I told each of my 3 plants that I want you guys to have 2 interns per plant all the time. So
Well, what I would suggest, if you guys, so we have a pretty good network of students and aluminums, as I call them sometimes. If you have any opportunities, feel free to contact me, give me the opportunities, and we'll disseminate it through the student clubs. And who knows, you might get more applicants. That's the only thing that at this point I can think of to help you out on a short run.
all right.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna,
I was gonna say one other thing too. It's like the way our HR, the way they offer salaries, you know, when we hire somebody, they'll look at their experience and they'll pay them based on that. If they had more experience, they would pay them more. But the problem is they come in, they'll get that experience, but they'll never make that additional amount that if they had that experience coming in. So then they want to go somewhere else. Do you guys experience that kind of a thing too?
So you're saying they have the experience?
No,
No,
they come in with no experience.
Oh,
So they want to pay them the bare minimum.
yes.
6 months later, they have the experience that they need, but you can't give them a raise then
Yes.
because it's all based on certifications now. So,
yeah,
and that's been part of our challenge
Yeah.
for everything that we're doing. And I'm sure it sounds like you guys are having the same issues.
same exact issue, because that's what I
Yeah.
call
And it's like the HR department got together and said, hey, you know, them wastewater guys, anybody can do that job.
that's what I call the training ground, because we bring them in from
Exactly.
interns or bring them in with low experience, and to me, we lowballed them because the HR made us do that. And now 2-3 years later, they're pretty solid operators because we teach operators everything. But now another city's paying them $6 an hour more, and they got a couple certifications, and now they're
Bye.
gone.
Yeah.
And,
Well-
when I try to go to our HR to try and, hey, let's fight to keep this person. Oh, we don't normally give that kind of increase.
Yeah. Oh,
So
no.
your hands are tied.
Yeah, it's been, and it seems like it's getting worse.
It's a
Over
mindset we
time.
have to change.
And it's sad because whenever you watch, you know, somebody that you've just trained for 5 years who's going to do a really good job, just watch them walk away, and you can't blame them. It's not their fault. I would do the same thing. If somebody came along and said, hey, I'm gonna pay you an extra $20,000 a year. Okay, where am I going?
And
Let me pack my bag.
yeah, what we're seeing now compared to, so the younger operators, younger people that's coming in, may used to change their benefits packages. When I started, back in 2003, I had a different benefits, more benefits. We call it the golden handcuffs. So now I won't leave because I got to hit that certain number to get the benefits. They took those benefits away and don't offer that. So now the younger guys, they just see money. Money is their only, because there's no other benefit to staying getting the longevity. So if we bring stuff like that back, I think that will aid in getting people to stay and not be so quick to jump ship someplace else.
That used to be the thing. We got lower pay, but our benefits on the
Right.
back end, specifically with retirement,
Yes.
but all that has changed. I mean, we're paying more now for medical and our insurances, and before, I know whenever I first started a long time ago, that those benefits were more valuable than making more money.
They were.
But now we're not making the money and we're not getting the benefits. So how are you going to attract people into this field?
Yeah, we had an intern that we offered him a position that was paying $19.79, I believe, to start. And he ended up declining it because, and he told us this, he said, because he can go to In-N-Out making 17 an hour,
Yes.
and his take home is more. So he actually declined the position and stayed working at In-N-Out.
Yeah,
So
Cave
because the
Creek,
take home is more.
Cave Creek has a thing up whenever you drive through it. I think they're paying $19.50 an hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could go flip burgers, and there's no responsibility. That's the part that a lot of people don't look at, is the responsibility of running a treatment facility. Even as an operator, you're in at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
and you have to make decisions. And if you don't make the right decisions, you're causing that permit violation.
Right.
You know, you're flooding the plant or flooding the customer, you know, and I don't think all that is taken into consideration.
It's not the responsibility and the weight of making the decisions. That's why I tell our staff when we got down to the lower numbers, I'm trying to tell my management that we kill ourselves trying to keep this place in compliance. Guys are burned out. They work hard because we don't want to have a permit violation.
Right.
You know? So we kill ourselves. It's stressful. The amount of stress is unbearable at times.
It's fun, that's for sure.
So I this is somewhat an off-topic question a little bit, but you know, obviously there's some challenges you have with just the new generation. There's challenges with everything that's got to happen within working within your own municipalities, right? It's almost like a double-edged sword in the sense that is automation a way of helping you get through that? But it's a double-edged sword because one, it makes your pool even smaller, and it makes, you know, but at the same point, you're almost automating yourself out of a job, so to say. And then also the cost of doing that and what that means.
And just automation does not take away, you still need the operators.
Right.
Somebody still has to be able to interpret that. Somebody has to still go out and calibrate that. So it doesn't really cut down on your workforce. It actually makes your workforce have to be smarter, and they have to be tech savvy.
More tech savvy, yes.
You know, we're working through trying to teach our staff to become more tech savvy because we do have a limited staff, but it's a challenge because
yes.
you know, you look at SCADA, you know, and PLCs, and you know, trying to find an electrician in the plant. So it goes all the way back to you have to grow them yourself, because as soon as they get the knowledge that they can move somewhere else for a little bit more money, then off they go.
Okay. What are some of the trainings that a new operator would, I guess, can you explain a little bit? What's the timeline from an operator, say off the street to a point where he's certified? What's that length? And then what are some of the trainings you would recommend that person needs to go through? Is that all handled in-house, or do they have to go to stuff like these out of things? You know, how does that handled within your respective organizations?
Most of our training is in-house, on the job training. The minute they start, if they come up with no certifications, we push them immediately to start trying to at least get the grade 1 certification, because that's a year-long, you know, you gotta wait a year before you take grade 2 unless you have a degree, which you can take it 6 months early. So we start to try to get them to get the certification, at least get that ball rolling. For us, we train in segments. You know, somebody off the street comes in, interns or whoever, they learn our liquids process first. And after that takes, I don't know, 6 weeks or so just to get the foundation down. Then they go jump into our solids operation. They learn that for 6 weeks. Then we go back and forth and get them, it's all hands-on training. You know, they're learning every aspect of the whole operation. And it's just a foundation, but to be a good solid operator, it's years. It takes, it doesn't.
And I absolutely agree with Mike. For us, we have the 2 treatment facilities up here in Flagstaff. So they'll spend 6 months at one and then 6 months at the other one. And at that point, they know where the buildings are. They know where how to write down the numbers, but they don't understand what those numbers mean.
No.
And like I said, most of my staff is under 5 years. And my one guy who just went over, he's at 6 years. He's becoming a really solid operator because he's starting to understand, hey, these numbers actually mean something. I need to pay attention to those because that's how I should be running my treatment facility.
Right.
So, you know, to get and we tell people, you know, on their first week, just learn what the building names are.
Yes.
And then all the acronyms, you know, that's going to take you another year. Right. And that's the challenge is. And so if you train somebody for 3 years and they're just starting to get solid, like Mike was talking about, then they walk away, you're back at square one.
Square one, devastating.
And now so there's no real classes out there for people to go and just learn wastewater, you know, and I love the internship, but again, they might not stay. I think
might not stay.
Jason was just talking about that, you know, hey, we've trained you and you're an intern, but you know what? I'd much rather go work at In-N-Out Burger.
So what scares me now, because now we're getting a lot of applicants that are they're graduates, they have, engineer degree.
Yeah.
And when I hire them in, I'm like, are they going to stay, or are we just a stepping stone, and they want, something better,
Oh yeah.
so it's kind of scary. So you got to choose the right ones that want to get into it, because you invest time and money. It takes time, money, and effort, and you want to retain these individuals. We got into a situation where when a lot of our staff left for, the private sector, and I hired in, so we had only had a staff of 10 at the plant, and we're down to 3 seasoned operators. The rest of the other 7 were all new, a year or less experience. So terrifying.
I feel bad for you, Mike.
It was terrifying.
But I've been there, done that.
I'm like, oh my God.
Hey, Mike, next time I come down to Phoenix, you and I are going to have to have a beer, maybe during AZ water.
Yes.
First, I would be drinking bourbon, but we'll go commiserate together.
Right. Man.
Well, we're kind of winding down here. I think it was a really good conversation. I would tell you from listening on everyone's issues, I would tell you that on a construction site too, everything you're saying we encounter as well. It's like I said, it's across the board, all industries. It just makes it harder because yes, you do need specialized people. And I think Mike said it best when he said, yeah, the water doesn't stop coming. We can't turn it off.
Can't turn it off.
Can't turn it off. That's going to be one I'm always going to now keep in the back of my head later down the line for y'all. Want to kind of close it up for the day. Really appreciate it. I don't know if we presented any solutions here, but I think it was a good conversation of recognizing the importance of it and maybe talking to the head honchos, the directors and stuff, recognizing how really important the facilities people are comparatively to other stuff. So I do.
At least I don't feel so alone now.
Yes, maybe all had a chance to talk. So I do sit here and I do really appreciate you taking the time. Jason, I know you came on last minute. Mike and Steve and Jim, thank you for sitting in on this panel. I do really appreciate your time, taking your time. This is something that hopefully we can definitely try and figure out in this current market and industry, and try and make sure we keep moving forward. So I'm going to kind of start shutting it down for the day on this entire 4-hour panel. I want to thank, let me move to get my PowerPoint up again. We had open saying, so just some closing things. Your PDH certificates will be emailed out for you who attended. There is a they'll have a keep track of that as it closes off. I want to sit down and thank all the panelists throughout the day, especially my panel here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be a part of that. And then thank you to all the attendees, to Jim, and I know Heather had to run out. Thank you guys for helping me put this together. Some upcoming dates for everybody to know is, as you don't know, AZ Water is coming up in next month in April. It is in person for the first time in 2 years. So hopefully we can see you all here or meet everybody in person. This will hopefully be one of our last virtual kind of trainings for everybody. The other thing is on the Biosolids committee, I would tell you that we are planning our next adventure will be a symposium, our Biosolid symposium this summer. We're going to be working with hopefully the Wastewater Treatment Committee again, and to coincide it with maybe a tour up in Flagstaff, working with Jim on that, but that's after AZ Water. So I want to just thank everybody as we kind of close down, and hopefully we'll see everybody here next month here at AZ Water through various capacities and say hello. So, and hopefully this was a very good panel for everybody. So.
And thank you, everybody, and appreciate nice meeting all you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. We'll stop it for the day here, and we really appreciate it. And be safe, and see you next month. So,
Take care.
Take care.